9.50 and 12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Welcome to another beautiful, lovely sunny day. Though a little bit on the chilly side, but it'll hopefully warm up as the week goes on. A lot of you may well be on your Easter holes with the kids. Hope you're enjoying things. Take a little bit of break with us, have a little bit of quiet sanity, send the kids out into the garden. That's how it works, folks. Anyway, lots to talk about, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, or smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Do we have a show for you? I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock. Now, I mean, things aren't looking quite so sunny on the stock market. I know a lot of you cheering on those Trump tariffs. Well, good luck with that. Yes, I hope they work too. I'm just not entirely sure that Donald Trump is able to completely, basically, outrun the laws of economics. But markets have plummeted this morning. I'm not going to say crashed. They haven't crashed, but they have plummeted this morning around the world. London's FTSE 100 index dropping sharply by more than 6% since opening. This comes in the wake of those tariffs imposed on every country around the world by Donald Trump last week. They went into effect over the weekend. And of course, there are now fears of a global recession. Certainly, we ain't going to be out of the woods anytime very soon. Now, meanwhile, the government has announced a relaxation of net zero rules, which penalises car manufacturers for the sale of diesel and petrol cars amid fears of a £22 billion blow to Britain's economy. It's amazing, that £22 billion figure. It keeps coming up as a black hole, doesn't it? The Prime Minister is going to make a speech later today in the West Midlands, and he's going to say he's prepared to use industrial policy to, he says, shelter British business from the storm. But how far can he shelter British business from the storm, other than the fact that we've got 10% tariffs, not 20% like the EU and many other countries? This comes, of course, as Jaguar Land Rover, one of Britain's biggest car makers, said at the weekend they would suspend exports to the US for the time being, before they kind of work out what to do, whether they can impose price rises and the others. Cars, basically largely luxury cars, being our biggest single goods export to the United States. Also, in the meantime, Keir Starmer's plan to reduce net migration has been pushed back until after Easter because of a lack of agreement in Cabinet. Funny that. And also want to appease businesses already reeling from the impact of new US tariffs, because, of course, they want lots of cheap foreign labour, don't they? And Labour MP Dan Norris was arrested at the weekend on suspicion of rape and child sex charges. Meanwhile, accusations have also emerged of bullying and harassment of staff in his role as the Mayor of the West of England. Extraordinary developments over the weekend. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. We're also the home of you getting your say as well. And the question I want to ask you today is, well, about the economy. It's about the tariffs. It's about industry. It's about how we protect it. I want to know, what do you think that Keir Starmer should do to help Britain as Trump tariffs hit our economy. Not just hitting our economy, they're hitting the world. Even with lower tariffs for us, doesn't mean we're not going to be hit by the impact on other countries, and particularly the retaliatory tariffs, because he's retaliating against Chinese tariffs and China's retaliated again with another 34%. Pretty much the biggest amount of trade that goes on in this world is between China and America. Chinese tariffs, or tariffs on US on Chinese goods, we're now looking at over 50%. Will that mean we'll get a flood of cheaper goods here? Well, that could be good, couldn't it? But won't do much good for our manufacturing. And yes, we do still have a manufacturing base, still somewhere in the mist. I want to know your thoughts. What would you do if you were Keir Starmer? What would you do today to try and help the British economy? Bearing in mind, of course, that as of yesterday, the new tax year began, and those national insurance hikes for employers and that lower threshold to start paying 24 billion pounds in total. I think it was the cost of that to the economy. That comes in basically from now. So that may be one of your ideas. But give us a call. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls, of course, are charged at the national rate, and text cost one standard network rate message. Right, well, let's get straight to the topics. I'm delighted to say joining me, as always, on a Monday is commentator Sam Armstrong. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, I mean, as I was just saying to Mike, you know, how are you liking them tariffs now? Look, I mean, there was a lot of debate last week, and it was largely partisan. I thought it was absurdly partisan. One thing I don't do is partisan. I have no hold for any particular party or any particular politician. I judge people on what they do, and is it good for the country? Is it good? You know, is it morally good? Is it going to help us? Is it going to help people who need to be helped in this country? Is it going to make us a stronger country? And I thought the Trump tariffs. I think the argument that they want to bring more manufacturing onshore, that makes sense. I love the idea of putting your own country first. It's not America's job to look after the world. I've got all of that. Completely get it. I wish we had. Really, really wish we had political leaders who felt the same way. Was this the way to do it? I think 100% it was not, in my view. Those tariffs are either going to raise money, or they're going to bring onshoring. They can't do both. And he's claiming they can do both. We're told they're temporary, then we're told they're permanent. If they're temporary, then you won't see companies going to move their factories to America on a grand scale. And if they are permanent, then we are going to see massive price hikes, not just in America, but around the world. Stock markets have crashed. Hong Kong crashed more than 10%, but again, we know that they were closed on Friday. All of the Asian markets are down. All the European markets are down this morning. FTSE down 6 percentage points. These are worrying times. We are. A lot of people feel we're in almost like 2008 crash territories. What do you make of it all?
Well, look, there's no doubt about it. These are big stock market readjustments. Now, there are some huge questions that separate this from the kind of 2008 scenario. Firstly, underlying it is a broader economic healthiness, which simply didn't exist in 2008. We got sick, the economy got sick. There was a sudden realisation of that, and that was where the value disappeared. This time it's in response to a very specific policy decision that the White House has taken. Now, we don't know yet how long that's going to last and whether that's going to bounce back.
And what other countries are going to do.
And by the way, it's not necessarily like there's a scenario that the best thing that Donald Trump can do is say, right, we tried that, we sent a message, put it back. One of the biggest lessons through all of this was that Brexit, all those years ago, may not have been such a mistake
wasn't a mistake at all, but yeah, a clear Brexit dividend there.
Hugely. And there is a scenario. So at the moment, because of Brexit, because we're not in the EU, which is, by the way, a deeply protectionist bloc that has huge tariffs.
Yes.
Huge
It's fascinating, isn't it? Labour and that lot, everyone, these people who are massively opposed to tariffs, also massively love the EU, which imposes huge tariffs on countries outside the EU.
Maddening tariffs, which, by the way, are just as punitive and just as political as Donald Trump's are. But in the EU, they're currently paying a 20% tariff. We are paying a 10% tariff. Yeah. Now, one scenario of these becoming permanent is you've got free trade between the UK and the EU. If you're making a widget in the EU that you want to sell to the US, you send it to the UK, you make a small change to it, it becomes a widget plus, you send it to the US, you've made a saving of 10%. Yeah. If that happens, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, are we going to see some of our good manufacturing coming back.
And 10%, by the way, is way higher than most profit margins in most businesses. businesses.
Yep, absolutely so.
Okay, but that would be great, wouldn't it? But again, Donald Trump says he's not getting rid of these tariffs until we no longer have trading deficits in a lot of these countries. US is never not going to have trading deficit with Cambodia or Vietnam, or indeed I would suggest China. When you have that supply of cheap labour compared to more expensive labour, and again, there's a reason why labour is more expensive in Europe and in America and elsewhere in the West. It's because people have a higher standard of living, because people they don't have to work in 7 days a week, 12-hour days for a few dollars, because we have had over the years, by the way, trade unions that actually made sure that people had a decent standard of living and weren't being exploited. So that's never going to change. That difference in labour is going to always be there between poor and rich countries. So I don't see how that changes. The other thing is, of course, impose those tariffs on countries reciprocal who have zero tariffs. Even Australia, they have a free trade deal and he still imposed tariffs. They can't cut their tariffs. They're already at zero. So what are they supposed to do? I mean, one thing I do agree with, I'm really pleased that while the European Union is talking about having reciprocal tariffs and taxing Levi jeans and Jack Daniels and Harley Davidson motorcycles, we're not talking about doing that. There's a consultation out, but I'm pretty sure all the people they consult are going to go, don't do that. It would be insane. We are David to a US Goliath. Yeah. We're not going to win. The whole point of tariffs is they make goods more expensive for your consumers. So I'm glad he's not doing that. In terms of what we're hearing, though, in terms of the changes on net zero rules, again, the net zero rules, we have to start with the premise. The net zero rules are insane. They will do nothing for the environment. All they're doing is making cars more expensive for us and forcing us to buy cars that we don't want to buy. Now, what they're going to do is they've got, again, stupid rules brought in by the Tories, stupid rules continued by Labour, but they wanted to bring it in sooner. But basically, the car industry is effectively completely damned by not just 25% tariffs, so we've got 10% on everything else, but 25% for cars. But they've also got basically this absurd thing there where they have £15,000 fines for every non-EV car they sell above the quota they're allowed to sell. Because in this country, in a free market economy, we have quotas for the number of cars you can sell to people who actually want to buy them. People don't want to buy electric vehicles, so they're not buying electric vehicles because they realise the cost of electricity is going up. You can't charge. You want to do a journey over a couple of hundred miles and not driving it over 30 miles per hour. You can't get anywhere without charging and stopping for a while. So people don't want to buy them. So car manufacturers are having to be fined to make them to sell more EV cars. People still don't want to buy them. And so they're being fined more and more. So he's going to cut some of those fines. They're also going to allow hybrid vehicles, which lots of people would be quite happy to buy. So you can be on the electric when you're in town, cutting pollution, and then you go back on the petrol, the diesel, when you're driving on the motorway. So that makes sense. I mean, I've got no problem with that. That makes sense, doesn't it? But they're going to, and they're going to allow those to continue to be sold till 2035. They said, though, they're sticking to these net zero rules. They're sticking to the fundamental rules. It's a tweak. I don't think it will do anything to really help the industry. They're still going to face fines. I still think that's absurd and obscene and insane. But is it better than nothing, Sam?
Well, let's be clear what it is. It is a massive admission on the part of this eco-mad, left-wing, hyper imposing of their views left-wing government, which is that these electric vehicle rules are costing British jobs. They knew that, right? They knew
this was brought in by the people you support. The Tory government brought this in.
Well,
your lot are just as much to blame.
I think it's fair to say that neither I nor the Tory government believe that I supported them. But nevertheless, look, you're absolutely right. These rules were anti-jobs. They were heralded in. They were cheered on by every single major political party in this country, with the exception of Reform and its predecessors. And we knew all along they were cutting jobs, which is why when they panic, which is when the job cuts become noticeable.
Yes, exactly.
Visible.
Yeah.
When the plebs begin to realise that they're getting sold out, that's when politicians all of a sudden
listen to them.
Can pull those levers.
Here's the thing:
put these changes
the
back.
British luxury brands, the Jaguars and the Lotuses and all that, the luxury brands, they are going to be allowed to continue to sell the diesel and petrol motors. The argument being, well, there are so few of these luxury cars, these top-of-the-range cars, they don't really make a difference. But once again, rules for thee, but not for me. If you're a multi-millionaire, you're a billionaire, and you can afford a gas-guzzling, top-of-the-range brand, you can carry on, but not us, not the plebs, not us, not ordinary voters. It is... I mean, I've always said, none of these rules survive, basically any contact with reality. Well, reality has hit seriously hard, but reality was going to hit anyway. At the end of the day, these manufacturers who play along with yes, we're supporting this because they were forced to. They have EU and America and the UK bringing a lot of these laws. Basically, right, if everyone has the rules, we're all on the same playing field. We'll do this. At the end of the day, we're not on the same playing field because China is always going to be able to make these things cheaper than us. I mean, it was always insane. It was always mad. It was always going to cost jobs. Suddenly a little admission of that. It doesn't go far enough. For me, this is literally rearrange the deck chairs as the Titanic goes down. I'm seriously worried about this, but we shall see. I'd love to hear your thoughts though, because if you work in the car industry, if you're a manufacturer, maybe you do some exporting to America, I'd love to hear from you. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. And again, I want to know, what would you do, and what should Keir Starmer do if you were in his job right now? And let's face it, any of you would be better than him. I want to know what you do to help Britain right now after those Trump tariffs have hit, because they are hitting the economy. They're going to hit the American economy. They're going to hit our economy. We are all going to be hit. Let's move on to something else before we go to break, because I want to talk about Israel. Israeli officials decided to ban two Labour MPs. I hadn't heard of either of them. I don't know about you. Yuan Lang and Abtisam Mohammed. They arrived in Israel. They were questioned on arrival. They were then deported after the Israeli Immigration Ministry said they planned to spread anti-Israel hatred. Now, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has said the decision was unacceptable. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, basically praised them and said, I think that every country should be able to control its borders, and it's what Israel is doing, as far as I understand. They gave reasons why they didn't believe those people should come in based on their laws. It's really important we respect other countries enforcing their borders. I mean, I'm with Kemi Badenoch on this one. I mean... A bit rich also, David Lammy. I mean, OK, he didn't call for Donald Trump to be banned from visiting in his first term when he was a backbench MP. Well, certainly not in government. But he did, he protested. He didn't want Donald Trump, an elected head of state of our biggest ally, to be allowed to speak in Parliament. He objected to that. So he can sod off with pretense that, a parliamentarian should be allowed to go wherever they want. British MPs, I mean, they weren't on a parliamentary delegation on behalf of the House of Parliament. They weren't diplomatic envoys on behalf of our government. They were simply two backbench, no-mark MPs turning up in Israel. They wanted to go to the West Bank and then stirring up trouble. They've called for boycotting of Israel goods. They've been completely anti-Israel. Why on earth should Israel or any country allow people into their country who completely oppose even their existence and campaign to damage their economy? I would have thought it was rather obvious that you would not be allowed into the country. I say all praise to Israel for saying, sod off home, you're not welcome. I'd like us to do a bit more of that here.
Well, let's firstly put this into context, right? British governments over a number of years, including the last Labour government, have repeatedly banned foreign politicians, including Israeli politicians, from coming into this country on the grounds that they're admitting them would not be conducive to the public good. Jackie Smith, now Baroness Smith, a Labour minister in this government, when she was a Home Office minister before, banned Moshe Feiglin, a member of the governing party of Israel, from entering the country because of his extremely pro-Zionist views. Geert Wilders, popular politician in the Netherlands, again, banned by the last Labour government. Chris Bryant, another British government minister, said it wasn't enough to ban Donald Trump from entering this country. He should be imprisoned in it for crimes unspecified, right? Labour politicians can frankly put a sock in it. They have been playing this game for far, far, far too long, and now the shoe is on the other foot, and they don't like it up them. Now, on the other hand, I actually slightly disagree with you. I think Israel, as a democracy, probably should allow its critics in. Not for the reasons that I think these are pleasant people, or not for the reasons I think it'll persuade these people, but by doing so. But by admitting people who hate it to come in, to say their things, I think it sends a powerful message. Because, and I'll tell you this, if you try and, as an even an impartial, even a totally neutral journalist to enter Hamas-controlled Gaza or the Palestinian-controlled West Bank to report the facts, you won't get within a mile of anywhere, because that terrorist organisation doesn't accept independent reportage, doesn't even accept free speech. Israel does. Israel plays host to a series of people that hate it, that loathe it, and
they
all
do.
of the rest
I
of
think
it.
no, I think it's very different to say we don't want, we don't want anyone criticised. Unless you say, I love Israel and everything that it does, or I love the government, you're not allowed in. No, that would be rubbish. And again, that would be anti-democratic. We're talking about two MPs who are actively campaigning to destroy Israel. They are enemies of the state. If you are campaigning to basically have a complete embargo on trade with Israel, you are basically trying to destroy the Israeli economy and thereby the Israeli state. They argue against the existence of Israel. I feel very strongly. I think countries should be allowed to let in who they want to let in. I criticise China all the time. China, I'm not sure I'd risk going to China, because I know our Foreign Office wouldn't do anything to get me out when I was arrested under spurious grounds. China has the right to refuse me entry, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, my God, America will refuse you entry if you once, smoked a spliff and the police officer was walking past. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I think countries have a right, democratic or not, to decide who does and who does not enter their country. And I just wish that we would do a little bit more of the same. And as you say, the absolute abject hypocrisy, and particularly people like David Lammy, Chris Bryant, Jack Smith. I mean, the number of people who have, on the left, who have called for democratic, or actually enacted democratically elected representatives being, unable to enter our country. I mean, they're living in Cuckoo land. The main thing is the rules are always different for Israel. What is it about Israel that means that people always demand different actions from them and hold them to our higher account? It's just always, I mean, I've got a beautiful blue sky out there. I can see really clearly, and I just can't work it out. What is it? What is it about Israel that means that people hold it to a different account? What is it? God, it's a word that begins with J, and I can never remember what that word is. If you can help me with that, do get in touch. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, particularly about, anything we're talking about. I want to hear from you when it comes to what Britain should do, what Keir Starmer in particular should do. What would you do if you were in his job to help Britain? Because Trump tariffs are hitting our economy. Stocks of shares have gone down in the FTSE market. Guys, your pension is worth less today than it was last week. OK, if you're not planning to retire anytime very, very soon. But what happens if we do enter a global recession? You think us having 10% tariffs, not 20% tariffs like the EU is going to save us? I'm not sure it will. What would you do to help Britain's economy in this scenario? Because I'll tell you what Rachel Reeves's plan is going to be. Raising some more taxes. Look forward to that in the autumn. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
All of these sorts of things are part of a bigger picture. People are really struggling at the moment. We have a changing global economic situation. It is not sensible to continue to be committed to these entirely ideological net zero targets, particularly when other countries around the world are still producing so much coal and using gas and don't have these commitments. That what we're doing here is just an act of self-harm that really is a drop in the ocean, will make absolutely no difference to the global climate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:26 is the time. Sam Armstrong is with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk. Let's get to your message. Messages coming in thick and fast about what should Keir Starmer do to help Britain as Trump tariffs hit the economy. Stock markets are plummeting. What would you do if you were in his job? Let's have a look at text messages. David says, negotiate a free trade deal with the US as soon as possible. I mean, to be fair, I think they are trying to do that, aren't they? Ben says allow for free speech and suggests 0% tariffs on goods between the UK and the US. I'm not that keen again on the Americans getting to decide on our free speech issues, particularly on that the abortion rights activist who was inside a buffer zone. I really disapprove of people being arrested and charged when they've literally not done anything threatening or anything at all. But the buffer zone was there for a reason. I'm in two minds on that one, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Kevin says stop pumping billions into the Ukraine war, especially when they've already lost. They haven't already lost, otherwise Russia would have 100% of the territory, not 20% of their territory. Ruben says, as an American, I think the UK got off lightly, considering the disrespect your government has shown us, including your foolish London mayor. I mean, I'm with you on that. I would have happily welcomed a 25% tariff to the UK. All right, Ruben, fighting talk, mate. Come here and say that. Joyce says, perhaps removing reckless net zero policies would be a good start. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And Alan says, scrap net zero and all green subsidies. Yay, Alan. Business will boom. Everyone will save a fortune on their energy bills. He has a chance to be a hero. But he won't. Ain't that the truth? Let's go to phone lines. Chris is in Epsom. Chris, what do you want to say?
Morning, Julia.
Good morning.
We've spoken before.
We have.
Yeah, we have many times. Well, just about that last item with Ruben from the States, I don't blame him for feeling like that. What Lammy and Starmer said before he won the 47th election, and what Khan's saying now, I mean, Christ almighty, they would hold a grudge against us. Listen, Starmer's got an opportunity now. He's done the right thing by doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? He's been in... How long's he been in? Eight months now.
Feels longer. No, it is longer. But yeah, but you're right. He did do the right thing by just staying calm, no threats.
It's the best thing he's done in 8 or 9 months is say nothing and do nothing. Right?
We need more of that from government. More doing nothing. That would benefit us all.
Yeah, it would. But now he's got an opportunity. He's got an opportunity to have a Maggie moment.
Yeah.
Now, Sam's not old enough to remember. Julia, I don't wish to be rude, but you possibly are.
OK, mate. Wow, this Monday morning was going really well until Chris got on the line.
But I love you, really. You don't look a day over 30.
OK, now he's just lying. Come on, what are you going to say? What's the Maggie moment?
The Maggie moment is, remember when we had the winter of discontent and we had rubbish in the street?
I do remember. It's all like living in Birmingham, yeah.
Oh, mate, I remember fondly the nights playing Monopoly under candlelight with my brother and mum and dad, but I don't want to go back to them. Yeah. But the Maggie moment is, she went to Nissan in Japan because of the tariffs between the UK and Europe. She went to Nissan and said to them, look, I'll give you a tax break, build a plant in the UK, assemble the cars here, and we'll sell them to the rest of the world. They did that. Right, it was very, very successful. There was even kudos value in Japan that if you manage to get hold of a UK assembled car.
Yeah, and by the way, they kept it for many years because the quality of the workmanship was so good. OK, so what would the equivalent be now, just quickly?
Go to BMW, Mercedes and Renault, all right? Renault maybe not so much, but definitely Mercedes and BMW.
Come on, build your factory here. We've got the skilled workers. You can export them for 10%. Here's the thing, that unless you know that the tariffs are going to continue like that, you can't make any plans. You don't just build a multi-million-pound factory because Donald Trump has said something on a Thursday, which he might change next Sunday.
No, absolutely. But, all right, watch what Europe does. Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, under investigation for a €500 million fraud, has turned around and has slapped tariffs on the US. Trump is not going to.
Well, no, they're talking about it, aren't they? They haven't. I don't think they've done it yet.
Yeah.
But
Trump is not going to back off from this. And if you look, there's an 88 interview with the big black American, what's her face, that did the Harry interview.
OK, you're talking about Oprah Winfrey. What are the...
I'm very useless on names.
OK.
Winfrey interviewed Trump in 88, and he talked about Trump's in 1988 when she was asking him if he ever wanted to be president. There's also another interview.
Right, no, I'm going to have to leave it there because we are winding around the world, and I've got to go to break. But Chris, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Really quick comment from Sam. Basically, right to do nothing, Starmer, right now, but an opportunity for a Maggie moment, asking those German car manufacturers and others, come here, is better off. But are people going to make decisions like that right now when everything is so uncertain?
Well, we're about to see if Keir Starmer is more of a leader than his own Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, seems to think he is.
Yeah.
If he can embrace this, there are big opportunities. Interesting times make for great opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, we can do better than Europe, definitely. I mean, I think we would anyway. However, the question is, if the world goes into recession, we won't escape that. That's the reality. And being slightly not as bad off as everyone else isn't really where we want to be. We want to be better off. We want growth. We ain't going to see that. Bearing in mind that jobs tax has kicked in on Sunday. 10:32 is the time. We're going to talk about this with a man who definitely understands his potatoes on this, Paul Johnson, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:35. It's just coming up to. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Let's talk more about the stock markets crashing, the response that Keir Starmer is going to have. We're talking about net zero. It's something basically it's a fiddling while Rome burns level of help for the car manufacturers and the rest of the economy. But what could Keir Starmer do to help us as we see stock markets crash? Let's talk to Paul Johnson. He's director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. A very, very good morning to you, sorry.
Morning.
I don't know where I got the afternoon from. Now I was wishing the day away. It's because that beautiful sunshine outside. Paul, look, I mean, everyone was predicting stock markets would do this. We've seen the Asian markets, so they opened earlier this morning, plummeting, particularly Hong Kong. We're down 5-6%. What could the Chancellor, the Prime Minister do, Business Secretary, and others do today to actually help the British economy in this market?
The truth is, we are very much at the whims of what's happening in the markets and what President Trump is doing. There's very little government can do in the face of what is a global downturn in the stock market. Certainly very little they can do in the short term. I think there's going to be some really tough choices come the spending review and the budget later in the year. If this looks like a long-term downturn in the economy and the world economy, they're going to have to make some big choices about spending, tax, borrowing. Are we going to do what we did through the great financial crisis and borrow an absolute shed load of additional money? Or are we going to see this as a long-term change in the state of the economy, and therefore just going to have to draw our horns in one way or the other on the spending side or on the tax side? But right now, I think that, to be honest, the government's doing the only thing it can do, which is keep reasonably calm, wait to see how things settle down, and then react when they have begun to settle down. And
that's the key thing. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we spoke to a senior advisor to the US President, Seb Gorka, on the show last Thursday, and he said, look, these are temporary measures. There's a lot of talk of, well, let's get back to the negotiating table. We've got everyone's attention, and then we'll see it. Now, of course, if that is the case, then we wouldn't see that onshoring of business for a US that Donald Trump has said the whole point of the tariffs is about. He said, we're not going to cut these tariffs unless or until other countries drop their tariffs. But he's put 10% minimum tariffs on countries for which they've got a free trade deal. They can't drop their tariffs below 0%. So not quite sure what those people can do. Ours aren't reciprocal either. We have like 1.3% tariffs, I think, on average on American goods, not 10%. So even if we went down to zero, I'm not quite sure how much that would help in terms of that. But this is the thing. In terms of the choices available to our Prime Minister and our Chancellor, we've got the jobs tax, national insurance hike, and the change to the threshold. That's kicked in as of yesterday in the new tax year. In terms of the opportunities for cutting spending, difficult for them politically with public services in such a mess, and Labour MPs would be up in arms, and Labour voters are already plummeting in the polls. Tax rises, I think most people feel that the pips are already squeaking, and then you've got the issue of borrowing. Well, when Liz Truss tried borrowing some more, we saw what happened there. Are any of those avenues open to Rachel Reeves?
Well, they're obviously all really hard. I mean, it's worth saying, President Trump's advisor may have suggested that this was temporary and part of a negotiation. Trump himself has suggested quite the opposite. He said that this is a permanent long-term thing because he just loves tariffs and he thinks...
Greatest word in the world.
Absolutely. Build the US economy. I mean, it really is an astonishing thing to have done. It is simply damaging to everybody, including it will be clearly damaging to the US economy. So we have to hope that it isn't permanent, but who knows? And as you say, the uncertainty is itself incredibly damaging. But in terms of the options facing the government, I mean, one of the things that we will have to wait and see where we are come the autumn. But it may well be that I'm afraid to say that come the autumn we might be in an international recession because the collapse in the stock market has happened for a reason, and that is that they think that growth will be a lot less, their profits will be a lot less, they'll be a lot smaller. People will probably be made unemployed as a result of that. Now, if we are in a recession, then then there are two ways of looking at that. This might be a temporary thing, in which case it actually is appropriate to borrow more over the short run, as we did in the financial crisis, as we did through COVID.
But we're still paying off both of those debts.
Well, this is part of the problem that we've got. One of the reasons we're facing this huge fiscal problem at the moment. I mean, we've got huge, very high levels of tax on average, and yet public services don't look great, and that's partly because we're spending so much on debt interest. Nevertheless, if we are in a deep recession, then we may have to borrow somewhat in the short run to overcome that. But then we have to be very, very credibly clear that we're going to raise taxes or cut
Well,
spending.
but this is the thing. This is exactly the same as we had with COVID, where everyone's going, oh, wonderful, furlough, great. But I remember saying to the Chancellor, right, Rishi Sunak at the time, your Father Christmas now, but you're going to have to be Scrooge later, and you're going to have to claw that money back. Everyone wants the free money, and then when there are taxes that have to be paid to pay for it all, pay the interest, pay the debts back. We're not even paying the debt back, we're just paying the interest. 100 billion a year of our money going on, just the interest on our debts. But no, everyone's like, they want someone else, those rich people over there to pay for those taxes that cost. No one thinks it's going to fall on them. In terms of, look, we can't escape a world recession. China and America, the two biggest economies in the world, are kind of in a tariff war. We're going to be caught in the middle. Is there any way we can benefit, though? One of our callers, Chris, just made the point, an opportunity for a Maggie moment, he says. Invite, the owners of BMW, Mercedes, other big manufacturers. Come and put your plants here in Britain. You've only got a 10% tariff, not a 20% tariff when you export to America. A huge market for not just British cars, but German cars as well. Massively high energy costs, by the way, in Germany, and they ain't going down anytime soon. We've got an opportunity to benefit relative to other European nations.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't sound keen.
I mean, our energy costs, I think, are probably higher than Germany's, but
that's true. I mean, but the tariff, the 10% tariff, would that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, well, as you've said, I mean, none of that's going to happen until we know how these things are going to settle down. So no one's going to be moving any car plants or anything else for a long period of time until we really know. I mean, if this is 10% and 20% forever, then that may be enough to result in the changing where people are manufacturing things. Though, frankly, if you're BMW or Mercedes, why move it to the UK when you could move it to the US?
Yeah.
I'm certainly that's not going to happen in the short run. And in the short to medium run, the big effect, actually, whether we've got the same tariffs as everybody else or lower tariffs than everybody else, the big effect is the impact on the economy as a whole, which is going to be driven by what's happening. Yeah. What's happening internationally. So, I mean, we do have two small advantages relative to a country like Germany. One, as you say, is that we've got somewhat smaller tariffs. The other is that we are very much a service-dominated economy. We focus a lot on exporting cars and so on, but actually where we really have a surplus on our trade, it's exporting services, financial services, professional services, all of those sorts of things. Now, they're much harder to, I mean, they're much harder to impose tariffs on. So because we are a more service-dominated economy and have got somewhat lower tariffs, it may be that this has less of a negative effect on us than it will have.
Yeah, although, as we know, it does.
Away from the fact, it's still a negative effect.
Yeah, it does impact key industries with highly skilled workers. A huge number of workers, 800,000 workers in the car industry in this country, and they're being massively hit. Certainly, the top end brands that do export to the United States. In terms of what's being announced today by Keir Starmer, and it's been sort of trailed by the Transport Secretary and others, this sort of change in the net zero rules. I mean, I will argue to the day I die that these are insane rules. They won't make any difference to the climate, but they are damaging to our economy. You shouldn't be forcing people through taxes to not buy goods they want to buy in a free market economy. But they're relaxing those fines on car manufacturers, allowing people to continue to buy hybrid vehicles for longer. But they're keeping those net zero rules. Now, there's a very strong argument, is there not economically, whatever one's political views on this, that actually dropping a lot of the net zero targets would make a massive difference, investing in cheaper energy, because energy is one of the big forces, the energy costs in this country, that is driving down our economy. Would that not be a massive, massive impact that is in the hands of the government?
Well, certainly the changes for car manufacturers are pretty small beer. I mean, they will help a bit in the short run because they'll stop having to pay some of these fines.
But it's tinkering, isn't it?
But broadly speaking, the target for 2030 is pretty much unchanged, and so that's going to still require an enormous change in consumer habits. It's still the case
which consumers won't do. They've made it very clear they don't want to buy EVs.
Well, certainly not at the moment. And I think the thing that I think this really needs to redouble the government's focus on is everything that will help growth, whether that is getting energy costs down. And that, I completely agree with you. The fact our industrial energy costs are very high relative to many other countries. So getting those costs down, reducing the costs of regulation and tax, which, interesting, the government has talked a good game on reducing regulation and getting growth going. But the reality so far has been in the opposite direction in terms of regulation of housing, regulation of employment, and of course the big increases in minimum wages, big increases in employer national insurance contributions. So it becomes even more important that they actually behave in the way that they say they're going to behave, to do everything they can.
If just find the question I'm asking my audience: what would you do? What your idea? If you were Keir Starmer, what would you do today to help Britain deal with this? What single action would you take?
I really don't know the answer to that. In the face of everything that we're seeing around the world, it's an incredibly difficult question, an incredibly difficult question to answer. I don't think any single thing is going to get us out of this problem. But as I say, we need to do everything we can to get energy prices down. We need to.
Well, that's drop net zero. See, for me, drop net zero. Even ahead of the national insurance rise, drop net zero today. All targets off. No one interested. We're gonna be drilling. We're going to be fracking. We are going to be getting our energy costs down and getting them more secure. That surely would boost our economy.
Certainly in terms of what we're doing, stopping us getting oil and gas out of the North Sea really makes no sense, even if you believe in net zero.
Exactly.
So that certainly would help a little bit, but actually doing some of the things that they say they're going to do on regulation and planning would be
rather than the opposite.
And you might want to think about whether you kind of row back on this massive increase on tax on jobs.
Yeah, indeed. I have a funny feeling we're going to be ramping up both regulation and tax on jobs and net zero in the coming months and years. Paul Johnson, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Sam Armstrong's a commentator. He's in the studio listening to all of that. What do you want to say?
Well, net zero is a luxury belief. And right now, as a country, we are not in a luxury position. We have lost that chance. And, let's just put aside the fact for a minute that we now can't even achieve net zero, because it's not just Russia, Brazil, India, China that aren't doing it, but the US isn't on board it either. So
even if it were desirable or achievable, which it isn't, it's utterly pointless anyway. I know it's the equivalent of someone saying, "Oh, I can have lose my home, but I'm going to continue to go on luxury holidays." This is your luxury holiday. Not that we afford to do any of that if this continues, but there we are. Lots of more calls coming up. We're also going to be talking to George Pascoe Watson, who's a political commentator as well, about immigration and also now no longer a Labour MP, West of England mayor, being arrested on extraordinary rape and child sex charges, but also claims that he was bullying and harassing staff. He has denied all charges. Of course, we'll get to that up next. This is Talk, Home and Common Sense.
we sort of sit here in Britain, and often we sort of take a bit of a sort of exceptionalist tone, and we sort of think we're slightly above the fray. Yeah. We're slightly, we look at Donald Trump and go, oh, look at what have the crazy Americans done now? And they're looking at us and thinking, well, what's crazy Britain up to? Right. And actually, we need these people to come and visit. We need our foreign investment to come to and invest in our country. We need tourism. And loads of people said to me that they actually wouldn't come to London now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer on Talk. Let's turn our attention now to where we are in terms of politics, not just on the economy, but in other areas, with George Pascoe-Watson. He's a former political editor of The Sun. A very, very good morning to you, George.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Once again, immigration often in the news, but this time it's because Starmer's blueprint to cut immigration has apparently been delayed. This is, of course, a white paper, and it was basically how to reduce net migration, something that, of course, every single government of every who promises they'll do, being pushed back until after Easter. It's about, basically, as we see official figures back in 2023, net migration reached nearly 1 million. In fact, it's gross immigration, the actual number of people coming to this country is about 1.2 million, but we have some people who leave as well. They've said they want to get their migration down, but the reality is the cabinet is massively divided on this issue, aren't they?
Well, all of these decisions in government have huge consequences, whatever you take position on. And here we have another one where the cabinet itself is split. Why? Because if you are the university's secretary, you need to make sure that the universities keep on having this constant pipeline of foreign students coming in. Why? Because they pay full fees for the universities, and those fees help universities fund the cost of more, if you like, less, popular, more niche courses for British students. So they're in a really difficult place. They can't get the money they need to hire their staff they need, and that's a big problem for them. At the same time, if you're the Home Secretary, you absolutely want to bring numbers down because you've got commitments to migration. If you're the business community, though, lots and lots of people in the business community want to have access to inexpensive labour. And if we look at care homes, where, with an ageing population, the care homes need in this country is huge. That's where many of the foreign students who then apply for work visas to stay in the country after they graduate, a fifth of them go into work in care homes, and we need care home staff. So every decision you make has a consequence.
Absolutely. And again, a bit of joined up thinking over the years would have been useful in terms of, education and training, and a number of people going to university as opposed to other training, and being available to do the work that the employers actually want. Here's a mad idea. Here are where the jobs are. This is what we'll pay you as a university student to study, but we're not going to get you all to do media studies or sociology and psychology. We've got enough of those already. It is utterly bizarre, but that's the thing. Whenever they talk about cutting migration, they would say, apart from, and then they go through students, social care, highway. But we know we've got huge numbers of people in this country already who are here as immigrants, who are not net contributors, even if they're working, in terms of the amount of money they bring in. They're able to, after a few years, gain access to benefits and the like. It's not working out. I mean, Labour, Yvette Cooper, Home Secretary, spoken to her many times. I don't think she even believes in borders in any meaningful sense. I think she genuinely believes that everyone should be able to live wherever they want.
And there's a lot of people like that in Labour who take that view. And
good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly. But what's very interesting about all this is last year the rules did change, and students were no longer allowed to bring their dependents in. And guess what? The number of applications for foreign students coming into Britain fell off a cliff.
Yeah.
And so that tells you that policy change can make a difference. But you can see from Keir Starmer's position right now, there are so many things on his plate with the tariff situation and more that he needs to basically not make a decision on this.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for everybody because there's no clarity.
Absolutely. And again, the Tories failed, and they even talked a good game. Labour haven't even talked a good game on it, so I'm not entirely confident on that. Another difficulty the Prime Minister faced over the weekend was Labour MP Dan Norris being arrested on suspicion of sexual offences against a girl, rape, child abduction and misconduct in public office following a police raid on his constituency home. The 65-year-old previously worked as a teacher. He's trained as a child protection officer at the NSPCC. He's suspended by the Labour Party, so he continues as an MP, but he's no longer receiving the Labour whip. He's of course already been, not only an MP, he actually took Jacob Rees-Mogg's seat in the last general election, but he's also been Mayor of West of England as well. He is now also, and he of course has denied those allegations, and it is important in this country, we do remember people are innocent until or unless proven guilty, but he's also been accused now of bullying and harassment by staff working at the local authority, in the West of England authority, in that role. Again, we've just had a string of allegations against MPs, some already proven, some not. Yet again, we were talking about, under the Tories, sleaze and problems of misconduct in public office and the like. Labour facing exactly the same allegations, exactly the same problems. Do we have a problem with our MPs? Because it seems to me that they are overrepresented in, so I'm not saying these allegations are proven, but certainly in accusations of this type compared to the general population.
Well, I mean, firstly, let me say it's very, very serious allegations, incredibly serious allegations, and we should, of course, allow the law to do its job.
Absolutely.
One of the great things about this country is we do have a strong, robust legal system, and long may that continue. So we can't really comment on his particular situation, but the wider question is an interesting one. And the truth of the matter is, even if a political party is not in power, is in opposition, there's still many accusations made about members of parliament. And that's, I think, because actually it's reflective of the country that we find ourselves in. We have got meant to be representatives of society in parliament, and all sorts of accusations are being made at all sorts of people in this day and age. We are in a much more litigious age. We're in a much more cancel culture age, when it's commonplace now for people, and rightly, to speak up if they feel they've been treated or the law has not been followed. But it is also true, sadly, that some people take advantage of the situations they find themselves in and wrongly make claims about people. So it's a much more hostile environment, I think, if you're in life, and the cancel culture is real and is used a lot of the time to take people.
Yeah, I did. It was interesting reading some of the copy, even in newspapers and BBC over the weekend, and talking about even the police statement. The victim, alleged victim. There is only a victim if it's proven in court. And again, people obviously have a right, as you say, to be treated as innocent until proven guilty. And we really don't do enough of that in this country. Very much appreciate you joining us. That George Pascoe Watson, former political editor of The Sun, Sam Armstrong. I mean, look, we have Mike Amesbury, convicted of punching somebody. These are allegations, absolutely allegations. But we've had so many different MPs of all different hues being accused of wrongdoing of varying degrees. I do wonder sometimes, are MPs of a different hue? Do we just know about these cases because they're in the public eye and it goes on the front pages of the newspapers when allegations of any different kind are made against MPs? Or are they of a kind of a different breed from the rest of us? Are there wrong-uns?
I think the truth of it is it is a combination of everything. I mean, there's no doubt about it that there is a certain type of older bloke who may be losing his hair, maybe have a bit of a paunch, that suddenly arrives in Westminster having been elected, and when there are this throng of young women throwing themselves at them, I think they find it harder to
We did see that with the Me Too, didn't we? Yeah.
And I think, look, that's part of it. I think the fact those complaints are part of it, but this is the trouble of being in government. You've just got more MPs, so Keir Starmer's going to keep seeing a lot of this.
And it's very much more news as well, because it's your MP. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the things we're talking about today, and particularly Trump and the tariffs and the impact on the economy. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us carry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Give me a room.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, listening on your smart speaker, or watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. Beautiful, beautiful sunny day. I know, as mentioned earlier, a lot of you, maybe with the kids, Easter holidays. Yeah, you're not sick of them yet. Well done. Take a little bit of a break. Have a little bit of calm and sanity, such as it exists here in the studio with me, joined today by commentator Sam Armstrong. We always get lots of sanity from you. You know your stuff, and calm. You know your stuff. That's why you always know your stuff. Lots more to talk about. We are going to be talking more about those Trump tariffs. They are hitting the world. They are hitting us. Markets have plummeted this morning around the world, particularly in the Asian markets. But London's FTSE 100 index dropping sharply by 5-6% since opening. This comes in the wake of those tariffs hitting pretty much every country in the world on Saturday. There are now fears of a global recession. Now, the government, in response, largely doing nothing, staying calm, which I think we all approve of, rather than getting hysterical and hitting back. I don't think that's going to work for us. But a relaxation of net zero rules, but only a tiny little tinkering one. Those rules that penalise car manufacturers for the sale of diesel and petrol cars. It's amid fears of a £22 billion blow to Britain's economy. That £22 billion figure keeps cropping up, doesn't it? It's almost like, 42 as that number, that significant number in the universe. Now, the Prime Minister this afternoon is going to make a speech in the West Midlands. He's going to say that he's prepared to use industrial policy, in his words, to shelter British business from the storm. The question is, can he shelter British business from the storm? Bearing in mind, we've just had those tax hikes in national insurance, which is literally a job tax that they hit as of yesterday in the new tax year. Bearing in mind, Jaguar Land Rover, one of the biggest exporters of cars, luxury cars to the United States, has said at the weekend they will suspend temporarily their exports to the US to decide whether they're going to be able to put prices up or not. Meanwhile, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, along with Liz Truss and others, have called for the release of a mother jailed for a social media post in the wake of the Southport murders. The Tory MP and others called the 2.5-year jail sentence handed to Lucy Connolly, who's the wife of a Tory councillor, excessive. She said she was a victim of a politicised two-tier justice system. Well, we'll talk to a lawyer related to that coming up so very soon. Also, Foreign Secretary David Lammy has accused the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch of cheerleading for Israel. By the way, as if that's a bad thing to do, to cheer for the only democracy in the Middle East. But this is after the country denied entry to 2 backbench Labour MPs. Yuan Yang and Abtissan Mohammed were deported from the country when they arrived on Saturday. This after the Israeli government said they plan to spread anti-Israel hatred. I think countries are allowed to let in whoever they darn well please and depart whenever they damn well please. Maybe Britain could take a leaf out of Israel's book. Anyway, all of that coming up, lots more to talk about. Don't forget, I want to hear from you, any of the topics we are talking about. In particular, though, what should Keir Starmer do to help Britain as Trump tariffs hit the economy and cause stock markets to plummet? Tell us your ideas. What would you do? Talk about like dropping net zero, dropping the jobs tax. Caller earlier suggesting entice the BMWs and the Mercedes to come and set up their factories here so they can face 10% tariffs, not the EU's 20% tariffs when they export to the US. Tell us your ideas. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Sam Armstrong, as I say, still with us. Sam, what is the one thing that you would do?
Well, the easiest lever by a million miles to dramatically cut the cost of doing business in this country, particularly in the manufacturing sector, which is going to get hit hard by these tariffs, is to cut the price of energy. We're about to lose our last major steelworks in this country for one reason, and one reason alone, which is it costs 4 to 5 times as much to produce industrial energy in this country than it does in the United States. It costs twice as much than it does in Europe.
And what are they doing differently in the United States? I wonder.
The dramatic difference is they do not have crazy, balmy, mental net zero targets that dramatically increase these costs. It's putting people out of business. It's destroying British industry, particularly primary industry. Yep. And that's bad for the economy. It's also bad, by the way, for our national security.
Yep.
The new dreadnought nuclear submarines that will keep us safe, they're made with 70% French steel, 30% Belgian steel. Not a drop of steel in those boats comes from British steel.
And by the way, there's no one sensible who doesn't think we're entering a more dangerous world where we need to be more reliant on. And we know there's stories over the weekend about the risks of the Russian sabotage of gas pipelines and the like, and we get a huge amount of our gas from Norway. But they've basically been nuclear subs, Russian subs and boats have been basically monitoring where all these pipelines are, and they could easily sabotage them. And at that point, we are, technical term, utterly buggered. We really are. We will have the lights will go off. Again, key other thing America is doing, they're fracking. They're getting the gas out from underneath their feet. We've got frack gas available for us. They are drilling for gas in everywhere and for oil everywhere. We're not doing that. These policies are insane, and penalising one of our major manufacturing industries like cars for selling us things that we want to buy because the government doesn't think we should be buying diesel and petrol cars. Again, it's mad. But I've been saying these policies are mad for years. They are still mad. They're now a tiny 1% less mad as a result of the announcements today than they were, but they are still hurting us. We are going to be hurt by this. If there is a global recession, as many are predicting, stock markets crashing, if America and China are going to continue this tariff war, particularly those two countries, we're going to be hit by it. But the reality is, I don't want Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer to be given a get-out-of-jail-free card come the autumn budget when they go, oh, the economy's in a mess and it's all down to these things happening externally. Rubbish. And I'm being polite with that word. Rubbish. Absolute abject nonsense. We didn't need any help trashing our own economy with net zero, with jobs taxes, with absurdly bloated public sector, welfare policy, you name it, poor education outcomes, and when it comes to people training to do the wrong kind of job. There are a million different things that we have done wrong. This is just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, but look, Julia, I come here on a Monday and I tell the truth, but the rest of the time I work in politics, helping politicians doing what they're doing. And if I was sat in number 10 Downing Street right now, if I was sat in Morgan McSweeney's office, the man who's really running this country... He's the chief of staff, I would be delighted. Keir Starmer has just been handed the excuse of a lifetime for everything that's going to happen. And look, it means two things. Firstly, he has got an excellent excuse for everything. It's like companies that went bust and they blamed everything on Brexit.
Yeah.
It was nothing to do with Brexit. You were just a bad company. So that's the first thing. But secondly, there are opportunities here. There are opportunities to shift the economy, to find new areas of growth, especially if these things become permanent. We spoke about them before by using the fact that we've got lower tariffs than elsewhere in the world. And look, you know, if you are in Europe and you do want to export to America, but you want to do stuff more locally, the UK is a great place to do it. And by the way, if you're an American company that's based in Ireland, you might think, let's go move over to the UK. So all of these things are great opportunities. Here's what they require, though. They require a Prime Minister who's prepared to say, look, events, actually, not grand plans, events are what dictates great leaders. And how you respond to them, how you pivot, how you duck and weave. And by the way, that's what all of us who are calling for Brexit said, right? They said, look, it is an uncertain world. Some of this stuff is going to happen. And we think as a small player, actually, the days of being a big block, being an advantage are over.
It's because it's slow. And we saw that with things like, okay, I know we've all learned our lessons on COVID vaccines and things like that and all the bad things that went along with that. But in terms of being able to be agile and moving quickly, one of the things I've always thought about Keir Starmer is that he's not an agile thinker. He's very plodding. But actually, the plodding is working out okay at the moment in terms of not reacting and saying stupid things and just keeping calm. When you're dealing with Donald Trump, that's what you have to do. But one of the things I really, really find difficult at the moment is the number of people, again, if you criticise these tariffs, you're the Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, you could be praising 5 different policies that Trump carries out, but you criticise one which, by the way, I mean, as I said to Mike Graham this morning, I mean, very, very good friend, we disagree completely on this, but it's like, how are you liking those Trump tariffs now when you see what's happening to the markets? Now, you can argue the market needs to readjust, you can argue things are going to change. I don't think there's anybody who's thinking this is really going to work out well for the rest of the world. Might work out okay for America somehow long term, depending on which outcome they get. I'm pretty sure that the short-term pain for American consumers is going to be too harsh that something's going to have to change. And this is the thing: you're not going to make a decision about moving your industry to America or even from Germany to the UK, as one of our callers suggested, if you don't know what's going to happen, not in 4 years' time, 4 months' time, 4 weeks' time, or 4 hours' time. It is totally possible that Donald Trump this afternoon could change his mind on everything. And when policy is that unsure, business basically sits on their hands and they don't do anything. And that is always a bad thing because we need them to be able to invest and make decisions and to move forward. And by the way, if you've got a pension, yeah, you're a lot poorer today. Just in case you're wondering, you've lost money today. So, you know, that's the reality for ordinary people, worked hard all their lives, put money away, doing the right thing. That's the reality. I mean, inflation and stock market crashes, not good for any of us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. So what should Keir Starmer do to help Britain as Trump tariffs hit the economy and cause stock markets to plummet? Tell us your ideas. Give us a call 0244 499 1000. Let's also talk about red arrows. This is an extraordinary story. I don't know how many other things we're willing to sell off to either the Chinese or the Russians to just totally show the fact that we are almost a joke country at this point. I find it bad enough that apparently we think we can't build, 5G or build a nuclear power station without needing another country to help us. But there's now talk that the RAF could have to turn to Vladimir Putin. This is an April Fool's story to Vladimir Putin, as the Yorkshire factory that made the BAE Hawks, the British Hawks that they've been flying their magnificent manoeuvres in, closed in 2020, and the leading UK alternative is years away in terms of the planes that they want to use. So those 50-year-old planes could basically be replaced with Russian-designed jets, despite the fact the whole point of the Red Arrows is that they are showcasing the British military, they're showcasing British industry and showing, what we can do, the ingenuity and the. I mean, we remember, those jets, important V-Day celebrations, when we have, coronations, things like that. They're so iconic. They are so amazing. And I know, I've seen the French ones perform as well, and of course they do it in the red, white, and blue as well. It's very similar, but it's so iconic. The idea that we wouldn't have British jets performing those manoeuvres is a national embarrassment and outrage, is it not, Sam?
This sounds small, right? It's planes that are doing acrobatics. But do you know what? I cannot think of a story that has made me as angry in recent weeks as this. The whole reason that we pay for people not to fight wars, highly trained pilots to perform acrobatic stunts at air shows and royal occasions around the year is to project British strength, to show the world that this is the country that conquered the earth, that built the biggest empire in the history of human civilization, that fought the Second World War and one that took on adversaries as fearsome as any in the course of humanity's journey, is to show that that is what we can do. And to think that we cannot even muster a dozen aircraft manufactured in Britain, and we had done it at times in which this country had an economy through the floor. This has been around since 75 years ago. It had the fallen Nat, then the Hawker Hunters and the BAE Hawk, and now we are reduced. We are reduced as a country to having to buy an Air Macchi M346, which supposedly is Italian, which is actually just a Russian jet.
Even if it was Italian, even if it was Italian only, it would still be an outrage.
But do you know what?
But
Actually, it's worse. Russia is a country that is actively attempting to attack us. We read in the Sunday Times over the weekend that they're going around cutting our communications networks under the floor, and we want to buy their jets to showcase our things to the world. They are laughing at us. We are a joke. We have been reduced to this in a generation, and all around, dictators, despots, they look at us and they laugh. Our politicians have done it to us, and they have gotten rich off the back of each and every step of doing this country down. And this is just yet the latest example of the sheer national decline that we have been forced to endure.
And again, an abject lack of pride in our own country and our own industry and our own innovation, our ability to get things done. Harder to do it, by the way, when basically you put high taxes on people and on businesses. Harder to do it when energy prices are high. Harder to do it when you close down the steel industry. Harder to do it for all of those reasons. And this is the thing that I just find bewildering. It's like, this isn't even something that should be up for discussion. I mean, again, letting the Chinese build our nuclear power stations shouldn't even be up for discussion. I mean, on what planet did anyone think that was a good idea? I'm not even sure. I don't want the French involved in it either, but they've got the expertise. We've not built these things for years. But when it comes to our actually military jets, and by the way, these fighter pilots, these are unbelievably highly skilled professionals. Many of these will be people who have fought, military sorties. They have helped protect our troops. They have helped defeat our enemies in the years that have gone by. And these are incredibly, it's incredibly brave what they do. And they are, as you say, they are a showcase for Britain. I just find it absolutely true. And I can't imagine any other first world country that would allow this to happen to them. And that just shows how much our politicians have just given up. They have given up. They are embarrassed by our country. They're not proud of our country. They don't want to push our country forward. This is an absolute abomination. It cannot be allowed to happen. I hope it's the front page of the Sun today, and I hope it doesn't happen. But I think this is the sort of thing that Keir Starmer needs to step in straight away and go, that is not happening.
It's worse than the fact they've given up, right, Julia? Because you and I and millions of people in this country look at the red arrows and think national pride. They think that this is something to be proud of, that this is the country of red, white and blue, of God Save the King, and of everything that we have given the world. But the people that run this country think that this is all things to be embarrassed about. Yeah. So why not show ourselves off to the world as a national embarrassment? They're embarrassed about our country.
Well,
so they want us to be embarrassed about it too.
They put our flag behind them when they do a press conference, but they're actually embarrassed about it. They're embarrassed about our history. They're embarrassed about it. They think we should apologise to the world, pay reparations to the world. That's why we're giving away the Che silence, because, we're guilty. They don't understand that actually we've given the world far more than we've ever taken, and most of the world should be absolutely, certainly Europe, everyone should be absolutely grateful to us. But there we are. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call on that. I want to talk briefly about John Charles de Menezes. That's the name that you instantly remember. That is the name of the Brazilian electrician who was shot dead. I mean, it was the absolute tragedy. This is a man, he was shot dead by a team of sharpshooters from the Met Police. He was shot dead on the 22nd of May, sorry, 2nd of July in 2005. That was the day after a failed second attempt after the 7/7 bombing. You remember the 7/7 bombing at the beginning of May, which took, I think, 52 lives and 800 injuries, some very, 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 very serious after those tube trains and that bomb, and that went off on a bus as well. And then 2 weeks later, if you recall, everyone was on incredibly high alert at that time. It was absolutely terrifying time, and there was a failed attack. Now, police and security were absolutely convinced that there was a man living in this house in Brixton who was one of the terrorists involved in that plot. He leaves his house wearing like a puffer jacket, I think, again in July, which again raised some questions. He was followed. The police officers involved in this were told categorically they believed that this man was a potential terrorist and was getting on a tube, was going to detonate a weapon. The incredibly brave police officers jumped over barriers, followed this man onto a tube train, shot him stone cold dead, believing that he could blow the whole tube train up and them at the same time. They were heroes. There have never been any charges brought. Quite rightly, those police shooters should be praised for their incredible bravery. It was a tragedy that this man was killed. It was a case of mistaken identity. It was a terrible tragedy. However, there's a brand new TV drama. This is a Disney Plus drama, a 4-part UK TV drama, which is looking at the events surrounding the 27-year-old's death. And his mother, who's now 80, says she hopes this will show the world the truth. Now, there's a really big, long article written up about this. I'll show you this in the BBC today, all about this, because it's ahead of the 20th anniversary of his death. And it says she wants to show the world the truth. Do you know the one thing that this 3-page article doesn't mention, Sam? The one thing.
Go on.
That he was here illegally. He'd come here on a visa. He'd overstayed his visa by 2 years. Now, that doesn't mean he should be shot dead by police snipers, but he wasn't here legally. He shouldn't have been here. If he hadn't been here, this wouldn't have happened. And it doesn't make the point that actually, you know, the heroes who actually shot him dead were trying to save dozens and dozens of lives, potentially thousands of lives. We don't know how many people could have been at risk. But I find it absolutely extraordinary. Isn't that an absolutely classic example of making someone into being more of a victim than they actually were? Terrible tragedy. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that happened to your son. It's terrible that it did. But you know what? Let's be harsh. If you hadn't been here illegally, it wouldn't have happened. Sorry, wouldn't have happened.
You know what gets me is that over the last 20 years, there have been dozens of investigations, millions of pounds spent, massive legal processes conducted, which have gotten to the bottom of this story. And the reality of that is that the officers involved were blameless. They were totally and utterly blameless in the way they responded. And yet now, because 20 years later, Disney, a network that doesn't know what a woman is, that wants to push propaganda down our children's throats all the time, is making a drama about it, that these officers are about to be dragged through the mud again by a fiction, a work of fiction that is going to be designed to portray these people as evil. I've had enough in this country. Look, there've been some good TV dramas, but we have to learn the difference between a piece of fiction and reality. And the reality is these officers conducted themselves in an exemplary manner.
I mean, there was a fault in terms of information, absolutely. And, you know, Cresta Dick, by the way, went on to be Met Chief. She was very much involved in that decision making. There was failures on high. No doubt, again, there should be investigations. I don't want people summarily executed on our streets or on our tube trains of our capital city. Of course not. But if you think back to the heightened situation, I would just be really interested to see this documentary. I'd be really surprised if at any point it mentions that the man was here illegally, that he was. She used to talk about he's a very honest man. He was a criminal. If you overstay your visa by 2 years, you're a criminal.
You've not forgotten to go home.
No, don't. Oh, I missed my plane. I'm going to have to get a plane on Monday. No, you've overstayed by 2 years. He was living and working here illegally. He was a criminal. I mean, doesn't mean he should have been shot dead, but that wasn't why he was shot dead. I just find it extraordinary that these things just are always whitewashed. It's just amazing. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the stories we're talking about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Red Arrows. That, I mean, again, it's one of those ones that you just see the story, you think, this can't be true. I'm so just stunned that this country could be run down so much that we can't even produce some jets for some air displays. I mean, these are amazing air displays, and they are iconic. I find it really extraordinary also that the organisations like the BBC that will show this footage at a coronation or a major event like VE Day, commemorations, and they will just say how amazing this is. Oh, but you don't seem to care about any of the policies that will enable that to continue with British-made jets. That's the thing I find bizarre. This is joined-up thinking, people. Joined-up thinking. Anyway, 11:24 is the time. Love to hear from you. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I mean, he's been very friendly with the Chinese. Yeah. He sends the president a birthday card every year. So he wants to keep in touch with him, which actually makes you concerned even about that, actually. Yeah. Because they can come along and, eat you up, very slowly and carefully, say nice things and you get involved. But Dominic Hampshire should never have said anything about this Chinese adventure.
No.
How could it possibly work? It couldn't.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's get straight to your phone calls. I know they're coming in on the economy and on the red arrows, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Ian, who's in Hounslow. He's on the line about the economy. I'm asking, aren't I, Ian, what would you do if you would, what should Keir Starmer do to help Britain with the tariffs hitting the economy? What's your suggestion?
My suggestion is I think we need to do some housekeeping. We could get rid of the House of Lords. That would be a big saving.
Not that big a saving.
Enough of a saving to make it worthwhile. We'll abolish tax reliefs from charities because there's 170,000 charities and you can't tell me they're all genuine charities. And if they pay taxes, only the genuine ones will remain.
That is a fair point. Although, again, I think we should just try and sift out what is and what isn't a charity, because a lot of these, they're kind of wink-wink political campaigning groups, aren't they? OK, right, next.
Replace legal aid with a pro bono quota for legal firms. So they have to operate as a legal firms.
You've got to force private businesses, private black barristers to work for free?
For a certain percentage of their work, yes.
Are you happy to work for free as a percentage of your work?
I do a lot of volunteering, dear.
No, but that's volunteering. You're not being forced to.
No, but I don't see why, because we know what legal aid is. It's funding criminals.
Well, no, legal aid is also funding. No, it also funds people who, for instance, like who are on low incomes, who couldn't afford a lawyer. I mean, I don't want people not having legal representation.
Well, they will if the pro bono requirement is in. Have you ever tried to get legal aid?
Yes,
Julia. So have I. And it was virtually impossible.
I'm not trying to get legal aid. I had legal advice, but no, I mean I wouldn't be eligible for legal aid because I'm not on a very low income or on benefits. So, or a refugee. But
thank you.
No, I disagree. No, I've got to be honest. I disagree. I think there are ways of dealing with it better, but I disagree. And certain things I'm not entirely sure why some people should be allowed like 15 different appeals for if they're from abroad.
Well, that's a problem, is it?
But I don't think you should be forcing people who've trained for years to get a high high skills to work as a lawyer to then work for free. I think that's an outrageous thing to suggest.
Who paid for their training, Julia?
Well, they paid for themselves. They had to go out. They had to get out tuition fees.
Yeah, but many of them trained in the days where they didn't have to, and they're still working.
Yeah. Well, same for everyone else. Okay, so we're going to force builders to do a certain amount of free work, are we?
No, we're not.
Just lawyers.
No, you're moving the goalposts.
No, I don't think we should force people to do free work for people.
No, we don't have building aid, do we? We have legal aid.
No, but that's because people don't need building work to protect them from going to prison. Do you see? No. You don't have a justice system if people can't get access to legal advice.
Look, you want a justice system. Let's stop selling off our magistrate courts, shall we? Let's stop privatising our prisons. Let's stop using prisons as lunatic asylums.
Okay. I'll agree with that. I'll agree with a bit of that. Okay, what else in terms of your housekeeping? Because here's my thing. I'm not sure that any of those things you suggest so far are going to boost any growth, boost our economy and keep people's jobs.
Well, I think what they'll do, they'll reduce the tax. But here's another one.
Okay.
Abolish tax-funded interpreter translation services.
Oh, 100% with that. 100% with that.
Now, when I worked in the health service, we got these people in, and I used to sit there in the clinic waiting for these people to turn up, and they never turned up. And we still had to pay the interpreter.
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, sorry, if you want to live here and you don't speak English, then you're going to have to bring along a mate who speaks English, or you're going to have to bring along an interpreter you pay. It's not my problem. It's just not my problem. It's a you problem, not a me problem there. All right, Ian, is there anything else you would do in terms of big picture, in terms of what Keir Starmer could announce about the economy, or Rachel Reeves on taxes?
Well, I'd raise the retirement age to 75.
Oh,
I know, I'm terrible. I'm a real tyrant. People living longer. I'm 64.
Yeah.
I invested in a occupational pension. I live frugally.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty active. Ex-army, so I should be. So I don't see why, because it's 75 is when the poverty hits people, when they need the care. So if we can move the funding to 70, and perhaps double their pension age at 75 as well.
Yeah, well, one of the key things is when the pension age was originally set at 60 and 65, that was when most people would have died by then. And it just didn't move for about 30 years when people started living longer and longer and longer. It is certainly untenable for people to spend basically half their life not earning. I mean, that if people are going to live to 90 and 100, that doesn't work. I'm absolutely fascinated. Ian's got some ideas there. Thank you very much for that call. Don't agree with all of those. Agree with some of those. Where are you on that, Sam Armstrong?
Well, big thinking is required because our country is up a creek.
Yeah, well, that's a bit Doge-like, isn't it? Let's just stop. I mean, I do think there isn't. We've got to take government back down to basics, welfare back down to basics, and that means we help the people who need to be helped, and we do the stuff that's the basic services. But government is now so huge and unwieldy, and it's way more than half of our economy.
Julia, we're not a wealthy country anymore. We're not. We're not anymore. So some of the stuff we used to be able to do, we just can't afford to do it anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the phone lines. Tim is in Southwark. Tim, you want to talk about the red arrows and the fact that apparently we're not going to have British planes for them to fly.
Hello, Julia. I'm actually an RAF veteran.
Are you?
Who worked with the Hawks.
Yeah.
The reason we
those are the jets that are used by the Red Arrows right now. Yeah.
Correct. Well, they used to be fighter aircraft, but there you go. We don't build nothing here. That's why we can't build them.
Ta-da.
We've got no steel, no production, no designers, no nothing.
Yeah. How's that working out for us, eh?
I'm not going to comment on that on the radio.
Thank you for saving our job.
Tariffs, interesting one. Over the weekend, I checked what we export and import, and some of them are so close together, we could actually zero tariff on some if Trump did the same.
Yeah, well, that's what we're hoping to get a free trade deal. We haven't got this big surplus that other countries have, but
maybe not for everything.
Yeah.
But there was chemicals and medicals. They were so close together, you could haggle the deal for zero on those.
Yeah. Well, if he's willing, I hope that's what they're trying to do. But basically, I mean, is there any alternative to the Hawks in Britain that the Red Arrows could use?
Probably not at the moment.
But that's telling, isn't it? There should be.
Well, we buy our fire aircraft from all over the world. Yeah. Bits come from everywhere.
Yeah.
God forbid if it did go completely pear-shaped, we're knackered.
Yeah, on that happy note, on this lovely sunny day.
I've got a very quick one for you.
Yeah.
We talked about the dodgy politician.
Yeah.
There is no mandatory background check required.
Well, yeah. That's a very good point. Whether or not that would show up in certainly in the case of some of the cases where people have had allegations or people who've actually been convicted of crimes, I'm wondering if most of those people it wouldn't show up anyway. Tim, really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Coming up to 11:34 right now. I just time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer, plus £10,000.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Good luck in that competition. This is the last day of the competition, closing at 11 p.m. tonight, so very good luck with that. Right now, we're going to go to a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about the incredible case of the Southport mum jailed for 2.5 years for writing something on Facebook in the wake of the Southport attacks. Here's why we should all be supporting her getting out of prison. That's going to be up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me. Now, let's talk about a woman by the name of Lucy Connolly. I don't know if you saw the Telegraph over the weekend. My good friend Alison Pearson wrote an incredibly hard-hitting piece about Lucy Connolly. She is the Southport mum. She's got 2 children and she is currently behind bars serving a 2.5-year sentence for her involvement in the post-Southport attack riots. Her involvement was down to precisely, one post on Facebook that was up for only 4 hours before she realised the error of her ways after writing the post and took it down. And yet she's still serving time behind bars. Well, the likes of Suella Braverman, Liz Truss and others have now spoken out and saying that when she goes trying to get a date in the Court of Appeal, it's coming up in mid-May, she should be allowed out on basically on a curfew and a tag as home release because she has young children and she's a carer for her husband. You'll remember her though as the wife of a Tory counsellor, jailed, as I say, last October. She pleaded guilty to inciting racial hatred for her post on X, actually on X, not Facebook, made just hours after the Southport killings. But should she still be in jail when there are people who've actually committed violence against people, not just written some words they left on social media for a few hours, who are already out of jail? Let's talk to Chris Daw, KC, who's a barrister, writer and broadcaster. Very, very good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Now, it's important to actually read out the post that she wrote. It's a horrible, vile, racist tweet, in my view. I don't like it at all. She wrote very, very, very straightforwardly. Now I've got the copy which doesn't have the full tweet here, rather annoyingly. She said, "You can set fire to the asylum hotels with people in there for all I care. I feel physically sick knowing that these families, Southport families, will now what they'll have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it." Now, her message was viewed some 310,000 times. She was interviewed by police immediately afterwards. She was charged 3 days later and has been in jail ever since. Why do you think her case needs to be looked at again?
Well, I think we need to decide as a society where we want to go with the policing of comments made on the internet, whether it's on Facebook or X or any other platform. The truth is that we are in a society now where people have access through their phones and through their computers at any time of day or night to social media platforms where they can say whatever's in their head, whether it is offensive to other people, whether it's racist, whether it's deeply misogynist. People have the technology to do that. And as a society, we have to decide, do we want the police to be involved in policing social media in the way that happened in this case? Do we want the courts to be involved in policing social media? And do we want to spend tens and tens of thousands of pounds to imprison people for sending a very, very badly judged and yes, racist message, but at the same time as thousands and thousands of women and victims of sexual violence can't get their cases into court at all because there is a massive backlog in our criminal justice system, which means that rapists are walking the streets today because there's not enough court time for them to be tried in court, convicted and sent to prison. But somehow we found time as a society for this case to be pushed in front of that queue. I find it absolutely appalling, and I just have no idea where as a society we're going to end up if we're going to send police officers round to mothers who have sent tweets, which they've then immediately regretted and taken down and deleted the whole account within hours, and we're sending them to prison as a mother.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. She's also a carer for her husband, a mother to young children. Again, no criminal record, no history of anything. It was very interesting that the judge in her case, and again, this was at a time when, again, we're always told, oh, we cannot get involved by politics, we cannot get involved in decisions by judiciary, except, of course, judiciary was basically directed. We want you to come down hard, we want instant, courts running 24 hours, put these people in jail. No one was getting bail. A woman with no history of violence or criminality whatsoever, a mother and a carer, basically not even been given bail. She was worried she was never going to get out. She agreed to plead guilty, even though she didn't plan to incite racial hatred. She was angry and upset at the time. But then she got jailed for 2.5 years, 31 months. And the judge, in his sentencing remarks, talked about diversity is our strength. He was making political, no, it's not. I would say he was making political points, fully signed up, woke judge.
No,
but what's fascinating?
Julia, I disagree with you.
You
the
do?
way that I've read the judgment myself this morning ahead of this interview. It's only a short judgment. It's available online if anyone wants to read exactly what the judge said. The judge actually commented, and this has been missed in the mix here, that this lady had lost a child.
Well, I was just going to come to that.
I'm grateful. But we are dealing here with someone who has a history of significant trauma in her life, which clearly deeply, deeply damaged her and would damage any of us.
Again, I was going to come to that. She has been diagnosed, she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the loss of her child as a result of medical failure, negligence at the hospital where her child was. Absolutely devastating. I don't know how anyone could ever cope with that. And she'd been struggling with that all this time and was always very, very triggered by anything where children died, which is why she was so triggered by what she saw and what we read about and knew about in the news on that, especially on that first day about Southport. I mean, God, when we were reading out what had actually happened in that case on the day when we actually had the sentencing, I mean, I barely made it through without crying. It was so traumatic to even just read it out. And I've not gone through anything like the loss she's gone through. But this is the thing. We've got to talk about now about these sentencing, guidelines that the Sentencing Council wants in terms of, allowing for people's past, their ethnicity and all these other reasons that are mitigating factors. But for some reason, the court just skirted over the fact that this woman was clearly a woman. There were clearly mitigating factors in her case, but they were completely ignored.
Well, it's the problem, Julia. This is why I'm always reluctant when people are going to criticise the judge, because when you read the judgment, what you'll see and you'll gather from it, as we as criminal lawyers know only too well, that the reason why these sentences were imposed is because of sentencing guidelines, which judges are more or less forced to follow, whether they feel that it's morally just or morally right or not. When I started out as a barrister in the 1990s, I could still stand up in front of a judge and plead for mercy and plead for empathy and plead for a degree of understanding about the individual circumstances of the individual defendant. But nowadays, all of that is, well, that's all very well, Mr. Dorr, but the sentencing guidelines are very clear and I've got to follow. If we have ridiculous, perverse sentencing guidelines, which we absolutely do in this country across so many ranges of criminal justice, then we end up with perverse outcomes like this, where, as I say, probably 50 or 60 or 70,000 pounds of public money has been spent just on keeping her in prison, where she absolutely should not be and doesn't need to be.
She's no risk. She's no risk to anyone. One of the key issues here is the legal advice she got from a duty solicitor was that that she should plead guilty, and there was the expectation if she pleaded guilty, she would be given a lesser term, and then she could go back home with her children sooner. No one was getting bail. The concern was that she was with women, being held with women who would waited months and months and months for a court date, who were not allowed bail. And so that she figured, well, I'll be out quicker. So she was given some very poor advice. Now, she's got an appeal case coming up in middle of May. She's now being backed by the Free Speech Union, covering the costs of that case, and arguing that basically, she was charged with the wrong crime. It wasn't incitement on that level. It wasn't such a serious crime that she should be eligible for those sentencing guidelines. But the fundamental thing does come back to, look, I don't want people thinking what she thought. I mean, the full tweet: mass deportation now. Set fire to all the effing hotels full of the B word, for all I care. If that makes me racist, so be it. Now, at that time, it was believed that it was an asylum seeker who'd arrived on boats. That was what went round on social media. It was incorrect. It was the son of people who had come to this country, but that was incorrect at the time. But to even then say, well, everybody else, I don't care if everyone else dies who come in the same circumstances, that's a horrible thing to think. It's a horrible thing to write. But the tensions were heightened. Is it something that should mean that the police turn up at your door? Is it something that means you should serve time in jail? Certainly, serving time in jail, I think, is absurd, given that people can shoplift 50 times and not spend time in jail, given that Hugh Edwards, the doyen of British broadcasting, can be sent pictures of babies being raped and he doesn't spend a single moment behind bars. The idea that she should be sent away for a tweet that she wrote and then deleted is patently absurd.
Well, I absolutely agree. And I just think we don't have the resources in our society to deal with the real crimes, the burglaries that people report and the police never turn up, when they have their house and their home utterly destroyed by burglary. When, as I say, there are tens and tens of thousands of reports of rape just sitting in the system, not being looked at for year after year after year, and all 90% of them never reaching court or more than that. But we're wasting money on nonsense like this. What we've got to do is we've got to say to ourselves, as a society, do we accept that people have the right to say things that are offensive, that deeply offend other people? Because if we're going to stop people doing that by the criminal law, then I'm afraid that many of the sentiments that this lady put out, with which I completely and wholeheartedly disagree, as clearly do you, but many people thought that at the time. Many people have
and we should be entitled to judge her in those circumstances for thinking it, but that doesn't mean she should go to prison. I mean, that's the key thing, isn't it? We're going to have to leave it there because time is against Crystal, Casey, a barrister, writer and broadcaster. Thank you so much. Sam Armstrong, you're very much involved with the Free Speech Union. They're now backing her case. It was Alison Pearson's fantastic piece interview with this woman's husband and her family talking about that really, I mean, I've always thought she shouldn't be in prison, but I think it's really opened a lot of people's eyes to this case. We've got the likes of, of many sort of politicians who are, Suella Braverman and others, and Liz Truss and others, basically saying, she shouldn't be behind bars now.
Yeah, and the interesting thing that Chris brings out there is the role of the Sentencing Council in all of this. We've heard this again and again. We've got this body of judges, of activists, you or I have never heard of. They say, for example, if you break into this country illegally, they have set the punishment at just below the level that would get you deported. Yeah. They say for her that she needs to go to prison for 2 to 3 times as long as they do. This is, I'm afraid, two-tier justice.
It is.
That's the reality of this country.
Simple as that. Which would kind of make it racist, wouldn't it? Funny that. 11:49 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on that case. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I tweeted out that she should be freed. She is clearly a victim of two-tier justice.
She spoke of mass deportations and setting fire to
what she tweeted was wrong. It was vile. But she realised that in the heat of the moment, she took it down 3 or 4 hours later and apologised. She is the victim of two-tier justice, and I just think it's wrong. And I've tweeted out, of course, she should not be in prison for this.
Okay.
Whether it's community service or whatever. Learn your lesson, but frankly, it's appalling.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:51 is the time. Let's get straight to a new topic, and Israel very much in the news. This after the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has criticised the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, for doing what he called cheerleading after Israel had banned 2 Labour MPs from entering the country at the weekend. Those 2 Labour MPs, who I've got to be honest, I had not heard of at all myself, were banned from the country and deported because of their anti-Israeli campaigning. Let's talk about this right now with Nicole Lampert, who's a journalist and joins us. A very good morning to you.
Julia, thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for having us, joining us. Yuan Yang and Abtisam Mohammed, I've never heard of either of them. They were deported on Saturday after intense questioning by Israeli authorities, basically about their activities, what they were planning to do in the country, and after they had repeatedly campaigned against Israel and for boycotting of Israeli goods and the like. Seems to me Israel acting within its own laws. If you're coming here to this country to stir up trouble, you're anti-Israel, not sure we want you here. I can't see what the problem is, can you?
Exactly. I mean, I think Labour's forgotten what it's like to police people at your borders, people that aren't fans of yours. So I think that's one of the problems, and I think that's why they're turning it into an attack on Kemi Badenoch, who is saying perhaps that we shouldn't let people into our country who don't like us. Yeah. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with banning them. They knew that there was a chance that this would happen. This has happened to politicians, more famous politicians from America, that weren't allowed in. So they should have been warned. If they weren't, why were they not warned? And what were they doing there? It seemed to me that they're there for their propaganda reasons only.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised why Israel would.
No,
would
indeed. I mean, and Sam Armstrong, I guess, when he's pointed out that actually, Labour were quite, people quite happy. Jackie Smith, when she was Home Secretary, banning Israeli politicians, Hurt Fielders from Holland and others. Chris Bryant, currently in government, he had wanted Trump banned from coming to this country. Not just David Lammy wanted him banned from speaking in Parliament. Elected president, elected leader of our biggest ally. But no, that's fine. I mean, their point is, well, these are elected parliamentarians. This is wrong. But they weren't on a parliamentary delegation. They weren't diplomats representing our country. They're campaigners and activists. Frankly, I think they should spend a little bit more time worrying about the people living in their constituencies who are probably struggling right now than worrying about what's going on the West Bank of Israel. But I would just very much like our country to spend a little bit more time not letting people into our country who hate our country and would... I mean, and these women, they believe in, the destruction of Israel. They don't believe that Israel should exist. Why would any country allow in people who actively campaigned publicly on that?
Exactly. You do wonder why Labour have made such an issue out of it. And I can only think it's because they want to distract us from other things. Because, all of what you said is right. These are not people that were there for friendly purposes. And although David Lammy said that they were there on a parliamentary delegation, we don't know what that parliamentary delegation was there for, but they haven't told us what charity they were there for. They weren't planning to go to any of the October 7 sites. They were planning to go to the West Bank. And there's been plenty of films and there's lots of news stories going on about what's going on in the West Bank. They certainly don't need to be there. Yeah. And what they just at home in their constituencies, there are local elections coming up. It seems to me that Gaza, Israel has become a kind of an easy way to get votes from certain people in the community, and perhaps that's the reason. It's instead of kind of mending potholes and doing all the things that MPs
getting
are
the
being
bins collected, and that's the thing. I mean, it's just really interesting in Birmingham. A lot, it's been pointed out that a couple of the local MPs, literally they've done questions at PMQs, written questions, speeches, campaigning all the time, spoken in debates. Barely ever about any of the issues in their constituency, like one mention of bins, whereas the rest of the time it's all about Gaza. It's Gaza this, Gaza that, or it's some other external issue, as opposed to worrying about what the local people actually need and want. And I think that is a real issue. And there's actually a very interesting report today suggesting that this is dividing us. That the UK security is warning that the Gaza issue is harming integration in this country, so, for and against. And we shouldn't be divided as a nation, as a population, about what is happening overseas.
Absolutely. I mean, there's 2 points. Like, one is that all these discussions that are going on in Parliament absolutely makes no difference to the war going on in the ground. And none of these people mention Hamas and the difficulty of Hamas, and that you have this terrorist organisation next to you who is vowed to destroy you. And even this morning, sending over rockets from an area that Israel hasn't gone into, from a humanitarian zone. And that's what Israel's having to deal with.
And that's one of the things, again, I notice pretty much all the reports on what's going on in that war are always involving, obviously, terrible deaths of Palestinians in Gaza, but never mentioning the number of rockets that are still going into Israel, which thankfully are stopped by the Iron Dome. And of course, we've seen lots of big question marks about the numbers, the figures that Gazan authorities, the Hamas authorities have put out about deaths, and basically looking at 1-for-1 civilian for military deaths in Gaza, which has never been achieved by any military, including our own. But there is that issue, isn't there, over the mistakenly identified Gaza aid workers who were killed by the IDF. Bodies of 15 aid workers, including 8 medics working for the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, were found in a mass grave, along with their vehicles also buried by the IDF. Now, you're not going to be worrying about, burying a vehicle unless you're trying to hide something. There's clearly been a terrible either tragedy or a crime that has been committed by IDF soldiers at this point. It's understood they claim that these people weren't identified as being medics, as being charity workers, when in fact footage shows that they were clearly identified. Some of the footage they found on mobile phones of those who were buried suggests that something horribly different went wrong from what went on than what the IDF are claiming. It is important to call out when either mistakes or bad actors within the IDF commit crimes, isn't it? It is important to also call that. That happens in the British military, American military, and every military. But we need to call it out when it happens.
it absolutely needs to be called out. It happens in every army, it happens in every war, and the fog of war makes things difficult. Just on this particular incident, it happened in an area where there was fighting going on. The IDF troops had been fighting with Hamas people who had left, and then it appears that this ambulance came to try and get those bodies. But one of the problems is that Hamas uses ambulances to travel around. So and a drone had identified them as behaving strangely, erratically.
This van stops and suddenly people are running out. You're obviously in a war zone. You're going to react to that.
Yes. And also, the IDF did tell the UN exactly where they'd buried this, and they say that they buried it as they always do, to stop animals getting to the body.
Except doesn't quite work for the vehicles, does it? But again, I think, these things need to be investigated, but I don't think we should be holding Israel to a higher standard than we hold our own military or anyone else. That is the key. There will be some wrong-uns, mistakes can be made. It doesn't mean the whole war is unjustified on Israel's side. Nicole Lampert, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a little quick break with the news, then we're going to be back talking more about those Trump tariffs, more of your calls as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you, as always, for your company. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you indeed for joining us. I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about the impact of those Trump tariffs. Of course we are. Markets plummeted this morning around the world, particularly in Asia, but London's FTSE 100 index dropped sharply by almost 6% since opening. This comes in the wake of those Donald Trump tariffs on every country around the world over the weekend. There are now fears of a global recession. Well, the government here announced a relaxation of net zero rules, which penalise car manufacturers for the sale of diesel and petrol cars. But frankly, it's tinkering stuff. This is literally rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The Prime Minister is making a speech in the next couple of hours in the West Midlands, and he is going to say that he's prepared to use industrial policy to, he says, shelter British business from the storm. But can he do that? Bearing in mind some of Britain's biggest car manufacturers already talking about suspending exports to the US, one of their biggest markets. That's including Jaguar Land Rover. Plus, we're going to talk more about the Red Arrows. The display team may be trading in the iconic fleet of British-made Hawks, now 50 years old, to, wait for it, Russian-designed jets. I kid you not. The proposal has been blasted as outrageous, which of course it is, and a betrayal of the Red Arrows Royal, showcasing British industry and reinforcing the reputation of the UK. This is absolute madness and tells you exactly where we are as a nation and our political leaders' view of our nation. Plus, we're going to be talking about the NHS. Cash-strapped hospitals have written off 256 million quid owed by foreign patients because of failures to properly check they were entitled to free NHS treatment, which often they aren't. I think, frankly, it's probably in the early billions and not just $250 million, those figures, because no one asks and no one checks. Anyway, that is all coming up. Plenty more besides. I do want to hear from you. What should Keir Starmer do to help Britain as Trump tariffs hit the economy, cause stock markets to plummet? Tell us your ideas. We've had quite a few ideas in already. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And don't forget, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also, I'd love to hear from you, particularly on the on these jets. I just find it extraordinary that the Red Arrows could be not just in foreign-built, designed and owned jets, but they could be in ones that were designed by Russia. We are a joke of a country if this goes ahead. We are a joke of a country. And with our leaders are making us a laughing stock. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Before we go to our first guest in this hour, though, let's go to Sam Armstrong, who's a commentator. He's joining me throughout the show. Markets been plummeting. FTSE 100 plummeting by almost 6%. These are big drops. We've seen Hong Kong, Japan, everywhere. We've seen these markets go down. We're going to be seeing them, in America too. Now, this is on the EU markets. This is going to have an impact. It's a direct, clear impact of those tariffs. Fears of a global recession, fears of a global tariff war. In particular, of course, after China retaliated, how could they not? 34% tariffs. They've added on to that as well. Where do you think this ends?
Well, the only honest answer I can give you, Julia, is I don't know. Anybody talking about it on the television doesn't know.
Yeah, you claim they know.
Keir Starmer doesn't know, and perhaps most worryingly of all, I don't even think Donald Trump knows. Yeah. Trying to predict this man is incredibly difficult. It could go any which way. I mean, in the last hour or so, even Elon Musk has posted some slightly guarded criticism of Donald Trump over these things.
He's a free marketeer, isn't he?
He is.
As the Republicans used to be.
As the Republicans used to be, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, has Donald Trump turned everything up on its head. The only thing I can hope is that our government is smart enough to try and make the most of this opportunity rather than doggedly sticking to the world it wished it did exist, which was that world that existed while we were still in the EU.
Let me just read a latest post on Truth Social by Donald Trump. This was in the last 15 minutes before we go to our next guest. Our oil prices are down, interest rates are down, the slow-moving Fed should cut rates, food prices are down, there isn't capitalised, no inflation, and the long-time abused USA is bringing in billions of dollars a week from the abusing countries on tariffs that are already in place. This is despite the fact that the biggest abuser of them all, China, whose markets are crashing, just raised its tariffs by 34% on top of its long-term ridiculously high tariffs. Not acknowledge my warning for abusing countries not to retaliate. They've made enough for decades, taking advantage of the good old USA. Our past leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again. Well, let's talk about that with Matthew Bryson. He's a former White House senior State Department official who worked in the Obama administration. Matthew, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Julia, great to be with you.
Thanks for this. Well, look, the tariffs haven't caused a problem for the US. No one should retaliate. He's warned people about doing that. There's no inflation. Everything's fine. It's going to all make America great again. Do you agree?
Well, very much not. I mean, the reason why oil prices are down is because there's such turmoil in global stock markets and fear among those who need to invest in new factories, new plants, that the world is unpredictable. Therefore, there's a great fear of a recession, maybe like during the COVID period. And so, no, I think what he's doing is creating such disruption that nobody knows how to act and how to keep the global economy going.
And that's the worry, isn't it? And we talked about this so much last week when he made the announcement. This is about, he is the great disruptor. That's what he does, and he's put, just basically knocking out the old economic order and starting again. The question is, like, does he really know what he's doing? There was a big question mark about the algorithm and the plan and how they'd actually come up with these tariffs, because he was claiming these are reciprocal. So these are half the tariffs which these countries are putting on us. But some of the countries have put tariffs on, like 10, 20% or whatever. Countries like Australia, where they have a free trade deal, there are no tariffs. So they can't cut their tariffs. So if you cut your tariffs, they will drop ours. But they can't cut their tariffs because they haven't got any. So it didn't make sense, an awful lot of it. Also, it's the idea that countries that are exporting more to the US are somehow exploiting America. But of course, America is such a huge economy and a very rich economy. They can afford to buy more stuff than, say, your average Cambodian living in a mud hut. I mean, I've been to Cambodia. This is not a rich country. They're making a lot of stuff now, they're exporting it, but they're still a growing, developing economy. The idea that those people will be able to import high-priced American goods at the rate that America can import low-priced Cambodian goods is absurd. So is it just that he doesn't really understand how world trade works, or is he kind of looking beyond that to say, I just want trade that benefits the US and only the US, full stop?
Well, I think for certain he doesn't understand how global trade works, and the whole idea of it in the centuries since World War II is if you open up markets, if you have free flows of people and capital, labor and capital, then you allow countries to produce according to their competitive advantage. They produce those goods and those services that make the most sense for their economy, and then they try to trade those and export those. And that's always been good for Republicans and Democrats alike, although there are market distortions that need to be corrected. And that system has really served the cause of global peace well. You think back to the 1930s, and one of the main causes for the rise of Nazism, right, was the Great Depression, poverty, the terms of the Versailles Treaty that put such burden on Germany. And then afterward, we learned our lesson. And we wanted to look at trade as a way to bind us together and eliminate the threat of war, allow economic competition instead of war.
Well, there was that idea with China, wasn't it? That we'd trade with China. This was something that, all Western leaders were talking about. We'd open up with China, and as they got richer, they would drop their dictatorial, global ambitions, and, and that would be good. That hasn't worked out that well. It's got richer. They can fund their military. They are a global threat to democracy, global threat, certainly a threat to Taiwan. But, there has been an issue with where they follow policies where they've got very, very cheap, coal-fired energy, and they can provide all the goods that we want much cheaper than we can. It does destroy our manufacturing. There is an argument for bringing back manufacturing. And certainly, America's kept an awful lot more than we have. I mean, we've barely got a steel industry anymore. Our energy prices are 4 or 5 times the American energy prices. We are in a serious issue. What do you think that, leaders like Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron or the EU leaders, what do you think they should do to respond to this? What is best for their relations with the US, which will be important long term, but also in terms of their own economies?
Yeah, and I mean, in the short run, I think they ought to fight back. Because if they don't, the tariffs are just going to keep coming, and this whole international system that we talked about that pays political benefits as well will be gone forever, which it may be given the fact that the U.S. credibility is so shot.
But hold on a sec, we fight back. If Keir Starmer puts 10% on US goods coming to the UK, that just makes goods coming from the USA that I or any of my audience buy 10% more expensive, just as Donald Trump has just done that for people in America. Making prices more expensive for your people doesn't do you any good.
I very much agree, but this is a political argument now. It's no longer an economic one, right? So Trump faces a race against political time right now, because the short-term impact of these tariffs is going to be really difficult for Americans. And already for those who have 401k retirement accounts, they're losing a lot of money. Inflation is going to increase, even though he promised on day one to decrease inflation. If in the long run, his theory is right, though, that tariffs will rebalance trade, manufacturing will return to the U.S., the U.S. economy will prosper. Okay, great. but it's going to take a long time for that to happen. So it's a race against time. And if Prime Minister Starmer, for example, and others, Macron and others, fight back and say, look, politically, you're losing this battle, President Trump, we're just going to fight back and it's going to be a race to the bottom. I think that's additional weight that's going to move the political needle in the United States back toward him having to drop this trade war.
But surely the only thing he's going to care about is his support in. I mean, he wants to obviously be a popular president. He also will have a lot of pressure from Republicans. The midterm elections, again, they're only next year. These things creep around very, very, very quickly. He's got control of Congress right now, both houses. Could, again, if he was elected, people always think it was all about woke and immigration. It wasn't. It was about the cost of living. It's always about the cost of living. I speak to Americans all the time, but even well-to-do Americans who are doing well in life, who are saying you will not believe inflation. If you've been to America on holiday, everyone I know goes to just Disneyland or whatever. They are absolutely flabbergasted by how expensive America is. Whereas we used to go to America and go, wow, this is so cheap. Everything, food, hotels, buying clothing and stuff, it's so cheap. It is not a cheap country anymore, and Americans are feeling it too. If he doesn't deal with the cost of living, and tariffs are likely to put up the cost of living, as you say, not just in the short term, but the next few years, then he's going to lose both houses. He's then a lame duck president for 2 years, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, and he's being warned that by, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas said the same thing. He said, if this continues, there's going to be a bloodbath at the midterm elections for the Republicans. Yeah. And there are some Republicans that are starting to resist. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa is really worried about the impact on farmers. So he's trying to pass legislation that will claw back tariff-making authority back to the Congress rather than for the president. So, and as you said, tariffs are taxes, and tax authority lies with the Congress, but the Congress had delegated to the president the ability to raise tariffs. So there's a backlash beginning among Republicans, and many of his own voters who are going to see their retirement accounts plummeting in value are going to be against him.
Yeah, that said, he'll say, look, we have already got some big firms that are saying they're going to move their factories to the US, which wouldn't otherwise have come. But again, these things can often take an awful lot of time, and when things are so uncertain, people don't want to do that. I've been accused I can say 10 things that I think I like that Donald Trump has done. If I say one thing I think I don't like, I'm immediately accused of Trump derangement syndrome by the people who've really got the Trump derangement syndrome, because the Trump devotion syndrome is kind of just as maddening. I judge people for what I think works, and I've got an economics degree. I've got a vague understanding of how these things work. But there are a lot of people who say, look, Donald Trump had to do something. The offshoring of industry in America is, it's all very well people having cheap prices. Not they've got cheap prices anymore, but actually people haven't got jobs, and you're losing those sort of working class jobs. And you're not replacing them with anything. Something had to be done, and the argument that Donald Trump is disrupting things, he's shaking it all up, and when it's all done and dusted, America will come out all right, because at the end of the day, America is the driving force of the world economy. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, well, I think it's a question of, as you say, it's a race against time. I think he's right that there are disadvantageous relationships the U.S. has on trade with a number of countries, but he blames Canada and Mexico. Yet he said that he negotiated the most successful trade agreement in history last time around with Canada and Mexico. Yeah. So definitely there needs to be remedies to disadvantageous and unfair trade approaches to the United States. But the problem is he's rushing this through so quickly, so radically, and disrupting everything that it is costing the American economy dearly. And maybe a more thought-out approach in which the actual objectives would have been coordinated and clearly articulated would be a better way to go.
We shall see how this all works out, Matthew Bryce, a former White House and senior State Department official. Apologies for the quality of the sound at the end. I think the microphone got moved. The fun we have with tech these days. Sam Armstrong, he's not a Trump supporter. I think one of the things I find really frustrating about this debate is blind devotion to everything Trump does as good, or blind refusal to accept that a lot of the things that Donald Trump's doing are good. And I find it so infuriating. You just get abused, from either side, as opposed to just saying, is this a good policy? Is this a sensible policy? There is an argument, and I do understand a lot of people saying, all the experts say this is a terrible idea. Yeah. Well, a lot of people say, well, those experts have been calling a lot of things over the years. Yeah. They've been wrong about they're the experts who said you shouldn't leave the EU. Yeah. They're, remember all those job losses we were going to have when we left the EU? Yeah. Then you got all those experts who told us that we were all sort of, saying the wrong thing when it came to COVID policies and the like. And again, that was all, most of the stuff they were spouting was abject, unproven lies, absolutely absurd. And then you get to things like climate. Honestly, virtually everything. People saying, net zero and green jobs. This is all it's abject nonsense. Yeah. It's all untrue. So I can really understand why people say, and immigration and economic benefit. The experts have been telling us stuff for years across the board that these things are good for us, and they're often not good for us. They're often untrue. They're not unproven. So I can understand why people don't trust the economists and the experts in business saying these tariffs were better. There is an argument that maybe something good will come of it.
Yeah, and let's be clear what is not tenable, which is the status quo. People in this country, people in the West, everywhere you go, have been feeling themselves get gradually poorer over the last 30, 40 years. They can feel it, they can see it. And look, it's fine if you're in high finance. It's fine if you're in academia. It's fine if you're in one of these ivory towers. But for millions of people, things have been getting worse. And they're the people. We live in a democracy, and they voted for change. And who are we to say? In the end, I actually get quite nervous when all economists are united on something.
Yes, exactly.
Because the one thing you know about economics is it is such an imprecise science. It is based on things that nobody understands, and there are no firm, real, absolute conclusions. Yep. So who knows? Donald Trump might be right. I suspect, on balance, this is going to be a minor net. I think there's going to be some benefits. I think there's going to be some costs. But nobody that is going on television today and saying Donald Trump is all bad and all the rest of it knows enough to tell you, absolutely guaranteed, that they're right and he is wrong. And Donald Trump alights on a real problem, which is people are and have been getting poorer while they have been told they're getting richer, and enough is enough.
And people, they know. I say it's really interesting that the average American voter has not had an increase in their standard of living for 20 years, and everyone goes, these figures are America's so much richer than us. It is so distorted by the number of billionaires they have who have huge amounts of money. And again, if their incomes are going up, but if inflation goes up more, but Julie, then I'm sorry, it doesn't cover it.
If you think that's true over there, you should have a look at here. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
This country has got massively poorer GDP per capita. When you take out immigration, America's got about 30-40% richer since 2008. We've stayed the same. So if you want to see where this country is going in terms of politics, if you think Donald Trump is radical, this country is staring down the barrel of big political and economic
And you see what's happening in Germany, in France, in Italy and elsewhere. And again, these people are all the creations of the left the so-called moderate centre ground who think that basically open borders and mad net zero policies and taxing us to the hilt and all of that they're not the moderates, they're extremists. The centrist dads, they're the radicals, they're the extremists. We're just talking about some sensible policies that actually make sure that ordinary people, who are the people who the governments are supposed to help. You don't have to help rich people, they're doing fine. But just ordinary people who are getting up and going to work and getting their kids and going to the supermarket, just that they should be, so you work hard and you do your bit, you should be better off. You should be better off than your parents, your kids should be better off than you. And if that doesn't work, the American dream or the British dream as it should be here, then something has to give. I mean, again, I'm trying to keep my mind open on all this. I don't think it's going to work out well for Britain, certainly. I don't think it's going to work out that well for Donald Trump. But I don't think he has a plan, but he can change his mind at any time, so things could change. I don't know. There may be a whole big plan involving China. Who knows? but we should keep our minds open. But I just think everyone, if you're blindly loving it because Donald Trump has done it, or you're blindly hating people who criticise it because it's Donald Trump that did it, you're not paying attention. That's all I'll say. 12:22 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV as well. Get some of your text messages coming up. Up next, though, we're going to talk about why on earth the Ultimate Pool Women's Pro Series event at Wigan on Sunday night was won by a man who was beating another man. Both of them claim to be women. They both claim to be trans women, but they are both biologically male. So why on earth is another women's sporting tournament being won by men? We'll talk about one of the women protesting outside that event up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
What needs to be addressed, and may I say, not by the police, is that mindset when they prepare to leave their home. They go, right, okay, where's my phone? Where's my keys? Maybe some cash. Where's my knife? It's that mindset that needs to be addressed. With so many children, they're carrying them because they think it will make them safe. The statistics prove conclusively that if you take a knife out onto the streets, then you are far more likely to become a victim of knife crime yourself.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:25 is the time. Let's talk about the Ultimate Pool Women's Pro Series event. It was in Wigan on Sunday night, and after numerous women had competed in this pro pool tournament, the tournament came down to the final. The two finalists, Harriet Haynes and Lucy Smith, battled it out. In the end, it was Harriet Haynes that won. What is really, really bizarre, though, is that neither Harriet nor Lucy is actually a woman. So why on earth were they competing in a women's pro pool event? Why? Well, because they claim to be women. They are trans women, i.e. trans-identified men. Biological males. This has been called out by the usual sensible folk. Former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies, a regular on this show, calling it, great words, bloody ridiculous and grossly wrong in every way. I know Helen Joyce, who we speak to many times as well from Sex Matters, pointing out, what are the odds of that? Well, let's talk about this with Jean Hatchett. She's one of the many women who protested at the event. Very good afternoon to you, Jean.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This just happens all the time, whether it's swimming or boxing or football, cricket, whatever. We're constantly being told, I don't know why women have got such a fuss about this. We should be inclusive. There are very, very few trans women who want to get involved in sport. I don't know what the big deal is. And yet again and again and again, we see trans-identified men, let's call them what they are, winning these tournaments, whatever it is, whether it's, boxing, an Olympic medal, whether it's swimming in women's, women's college swimming in America, whatever it is, more and more men are winning these awards. Talk us through what your protest was about yesterday.
It was organised by Women's Rights Network, actually. I went along just to support Lynn Pinchers, who is the pool player who initially refused to play Harriet Haynes and walked off.
Good
so, the calls for boycott that we've been seeing, Lynn was brave enough to do that. She was one of the first women to do that. So an incredibly brave woman. And she put a small call out just saying, can anybody come? So it was a handful of us actually turned up to support her. As we arrived, she was already thrown out. She was out on the street, security guards all around her. So we went, come on, let's go round and go in. So we didn't acknowledge, because we'd have been thrown out too then. We went in, held a banner up at the side of this cheating man, and it said, he's a man and save women's sport, because it's really essential that we stand up for the women who are losing their... and people have said, what's the physical advantage?
Yes, I've seen that all over social media,
women's competition, and it's a working class competition as well, basically, isn't it? And there's prize money there. So those two men have taken the two top prizes.
But here's the thing. If there was no difference between men and women in pool, then they would be playing in the men's event, wouldn't they? But they clearly couldn't win the men's event. And there is a physical difference. There's a physical size. There's eventually strength, length of your arms, your power in your shoulders. How tall you are. There are loads of physical differences between men and women which play out in every sport. There's even a physical difference and a brain difference. Women and men playing at chess, which is an entirely non-physical sport. There's a reason why there were these tournaments set up so that women could get ahead. That's the thing I don't understand. It's like, it's a women's tournament. The proof is on this. The tin says it all. It's a women's tournament. But this is the thing. I love that the top female player who was ousted, again, it was 4 female-born opponents. Of course, women. Let's call them what they are. Women were beaten for them to get through. If women athletes, women competitors in pool, darts, whatever it is, if they simply refuse to play, they just simply say no. There's a wonderful image over the weekend that emerged of a young woman refusing to fence against a man, and she puts on her kit, she goes to start, and at the moment she's due to start, she goes down on one knee, puts down her fencing sword, and refuses to do it. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of this woman. If every single female competitor said, no, we just won't play. We will not play against cheats, as you say, which is what these men are, it wouldn't happen. But we need everyone to do that.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, because we were there yesterday and we saw the young woman who was playing Harriet Haynes before we jumped in with the banners. And they have to be brave to do that. And, Lynn's an older woman and she's done it. However, we can't really force them. So it is sometimes up to middle-aged women like me, nothing to lose, no investment in the sport, can't be sanctioned, to run in there and say, no, this is not fair. We do it on behalf of those women who kind of, they're not quite confident enough yet. But the thing is, there were blokes at the side of me who turned round and said, can't you have them removed? And
about you guys?
Us, yeah. And, can't you get these out of here or something like that? And I said, why are you happy with that man playing that woman? And he said, well, she's earned the right, everybody's accepted her. And I said, no, women haven't accepted her.
No.
That's why we're
There's
here.
been forced. But again, no one is saying that someone who identifies as trans can't play pool in a pro competition. They just have to play in the competition that suits their biological sex. It's as simple as that.
There's an open competition.
Well, there you are then. Done.
And there's a mixed competition. Those men had no right to be there and no need to be there. But my partner challenged him on the way back in. We'd been for a pint after we got thrown out, and they manhandled us, by the way, quite heftily. And we all went off.
They didn't trans women manhandle you. They just manhandled you. It's difficult to know the terminology.
Well, it was a man and he did put hands on me. So I think I know men from women. But Haynes was coming back in as we were woman, it's just an adjective before my name. Woman, it's just an adjective before my name. So he was saying that putting trans before his name made him an actual woman. So it's just words to him. He knew. He was laughing in our faces, Julia, and they are laughing in the faces of all of these women.
Absolutely. Well, good on you for turning up. Good on you for standing up for women. Well, absolutely applaud to you. Massive applause to the women who refuse to go along with this madness. And again, we shouldn't be putting female athletes or competitors in any of these things. We shouldn't be putting them in that position in the first place. But all credit to people who stand up on this. Thank you so much for joining us. Sam Armstrong, again, this is all just madness. And we just call these people, they're A, he's a man, or both of the two finalists were men, and B, they're cheating men. They're cheats. Feel free to sue me, guys. You are cheats. That's what you are. When you compete against women, when you're not actually women, you're a cheat. I mean, you should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed to have entered that competition, to have won it. Embarrassed.
We are through the looking glass now. And do you know what this is? It's a riposte to those sports chiefs, to those wokesters, to those cowards that said, oh, this is a tiny thing. We're talking about a vanishingly small amount of people. We're not. OK, the final is made up entirely of men in the women's final, right? And this is going to be the reality for women's sport.
There will be no women's sport.
The facts don't meet the ideology, and it's just never going to end well.
And again, it's almost like there was a reason why we had women's sport, women's competition. It's almost like there was a reason why we did it. It's so frustrating, isn't it? Now, let's go to a quick phone call, not on this, but on one of the other topics we've been talking about today, so I want to make sure I squeeze it in before we go to a break. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. He's called up on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, you wanted to talk about where we are with David Lammy criticising Kemi Badenoch over those two Labour MPs who were basically banned and deported from Israel. What did you want to say?
Yeah, so thick as mince Lammy, he's come out. First and foremost, they are just visitors. They should have told the Israeli government. They're just visitors. But more importantly, Hamas beat to death and dumped the body of people that protested against Hamas.
Yep. Oh, Andrew, this is such a bad phone line. Can you move, I don't know, move two feet to the right? That sometimes works for some reason.
Yeah, is that better?
That's better. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So Lammy has complained about these two MPs who are just visitors. It's not an official trip. But what about the Hamas people that beat to death those people that came out and said, we don't want Hamas anymore? He said nothing about that. And that shows the hypocrisy. This was a nothing visit by people who were looking to bring Israel into a negative light.
Yeah, but it's not just bring them down. They literally want a boycott of Israeli trade. They want Israel not to exist. I'm not entirely sure we should have people to this country who are campaigning to undermine our economy and our right to exist. I don't know why any country would let those people in ever.
Yeah, and that's just a common sense view. But remember, we're working with Lammy, and he is really dim.
Harsh, but given having watched his Celebrity Mastermind, probably fair. Andrew, thank you for that. 12:35 is the time. Time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets to Wembley this summer and £10,000.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Very good luck with that competition. Just a reminder, today is the last day of that competition. It closes at 11 p.m. tonight, so very good luck with that. Coming up, we are going to be talking about the Red Arrows and why they may be using a Russian-designed jet, I kid you not, for their displays. Plus, why we should have a 72-hour survival kit in our homes because of the threat from Russia. We'll be talking to Major General Chip Chapman about that in just a few moments. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. At 12:38 is the time. Let's go straight to our next guest, Major General Chip Chapman. He's a former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence and joins us now. Very, very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Two big stories I want to talk to you about, and both of them are just utterly flabbergasting. But first up, let's talk about the iconic RAF Red Arrow jets. Apparently, 50 years old, probably not going to last much longer. They're in danger of being replaced by, guess what, Italian-made but Russian-designed jets. It's been slammed as an outrageous move by pretty much anyone who's got any sense at all. This is a national humiliation, isn't it?
Well, obviously, you would like a British jet to replace the Hawk. The Hawk T1 will have its out-of-service date in the next 5 to 10 years. And there are probably three options that they're looking at to make sure that doesn't happen. The first would be to upgrade the Hawk T2, extend the life of the second sort of model. The second one would be to buy a commercial off-the-shelf plane, and that could be a Korean one or the one which causes all the problem, the Leonardo M346. Or thirdly, which I think is probably more likely, that will develop a UK model designed and linked to the Tempest program, which is the future combat aircraft due to come in somewhere around 2035. So the notion of buying this aircraft is there. It doesn't actually mean that it will happen. There's two separate issues, really. The first one is the procurement issue of the replacement decision for the Hawk T1. And the second one in the Defence Review is really the future of the Red Arrows, because that probably is being put as a saving measure.
And again, we all want cost cutting, we understand that. But again, they perform an important role in terms of showcasing our nation. We V-Day, commemorations, coronations, other big state occasions, having those Red Arrows. We've got them on the screen now. It's absolutely mesmerising watching them. Other countries, I've watched in France. I've watched the French version as well. And equally impressive. And of course, same colours as well. So you can kind of pretend it's the Red Arrows when you're there. But this thing, this is about showcasing, British, brilliance, our kit, our training, our expertise. The ability to perform these amazing manoeuvres, this professionalism, the bravery. It's incredibly brave what these pilots do as well. But if we're just going to we need to cut some costs, so we'll tick that off. It doesn't really do anything useful. We'll tick that off. But actually is part of sort of advertising our country and what we do to the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And although I said it will be put up as a saving measure, which I know it has, that doesn't mean it's going to be taken. It's what's known as the Royal Yacht. Yeah. The problem is a Royal Yacht is a measure which you think is beyond contemplation, but the Royal Yacht was actually binned about 20 years ago.
I was in favour of bidding the Royal Yacht, I've got to be honest with you. Sam Armstrong's rolling his eyes here. I know some people feel very strongly about it. You could just hire a fancy yacht that some oligarch owns and borrow that when you need to go on a foreign trip and you're the Queen or the King.
Yeah, that's true. What I wouldn't say, though, in this decision, particularly how it's been framed with the Russian-Italian axis, is that is really old news in the sense that when the Soviet Union ended in the early 90s, there was a collaboration between Aeromacchi, which doesn't now exist, and the Russians, which made commercial sense of trying to bring the Russians into the commercial world. That ended in 2000, so it's a completely different thing. They went down a procurement route on the Yak 130. The Italians went down a different route. They're completely separate aircraft.
But here's the thing. Chip. It is that we're in a situation where, isn't it just an embarrassment that we're supposed to be a major military power? I know we're nowhere near up there with the Americans, the Russians, and the Chinese, but we're supposed to be a serious player, and we don't have a jet. What does that tell us?
Well, I think that's why you'll see that this will probably be part of the Tempest program for the future. Yeah. One of the things about any procurement these days, particularly in a pan-European sense, because I think we'll probably go to that if international relations with the Americans are disrupted, is that you need economies of scale. You can't You can't procure just 10 jets or 20 jets. You need 100 jets, which you need to sell collaboratively, which is why the Tempest program has now become a thing called the Global Combat Air Program, which does include Japan, does include Italy. Because
at least they're our allies, not a hostile nation. I mean, that's the thing. Now, I want to move on because time is a little bit against us, Chip. And this is reports at the weekend that security people recommend that we should be all having a 72-hour survival kit in case that Vladimir Putin sabotages our gas pipelines or electricity supply and causes major blackouts. So you should have torches, you'd have water, a battery-operated radio, tins of food that can't go off and the like. And I would say at that point get a gun as well. But we are absolutely in a situation where we are incredibly vulnerable to our energy supplies being cut off like that. Gas supplies in pipes largely coming from Norway, electricity supplies in cables under the sea. The reality is we know that Putin's navy are constantly monitoring the North Sea and the Channel and our supplies, and that they could sabotage at any time, and that would have a huge impact on us.
It would. It works both ways, though. So the game can be played both ways. And indeed, Russia would argue that we've played it both ways. There's no real evidence of that. So, for example, the Russian Rostelecom in February said that its underwater cables in the Baltics had been severed by external influence. And at the same time, 2 other cables in the Gulf of Finland were being repaired, which were Russian cables. The fact is, there is malign activity, but most of the cables which are interfered with internationally are from either seismic or weather events, or from anchor dragging, which may be benign, or from bottom fishing. So cables do get cut. There is a repair capability of cables. What we have to look out for is the fact that they've been surveyed by the Russians and we can do something about them. Now, is something being done about that? Yes, it is. So, for example, in a UK sense, we've just procured last year a thing called the Multi-Role Ocean Surveillance Ship. We've also run on life of HMS Scott, a ship life enhancement program. In the Baltic itself, there's a new NATO operation there, Baltic Sentry, using both artificial intelligence and other drones to surveil all the Russian shadow fleet. So it's not a benign environment for the Russians as well. I think it is very hard to actually sever the lifeblood of the UK to an extent where you would have that need and necessity for a 72-hour package. Because we live in an environment which is essentially benign compared to Europe, where you do have earthquakes and things like that.
Well, yeah, we do. But again, and there is always going to be the risk, again, but part of the point is that we don't go around, deliberately trying to attack these supply lines because we're not trying to provoke a war, where we see that Russia's activities are, again and again are provocative, and we tend not to act. But, bad things can happen. You can have a tsunami. We're very lucky, as you say, we live in a zone where we don't live with those things. But we are nevertheless far too vulnerable to either a deliberate or an accidental impact on our supply lines. That's just not tenable in the modern age, when everything is reliant on particularly electricity. I mean gas in terms of running our industry, heating our homes and the like, but electricity is pretty much everything.
Well, that's right, but that's why you have this golden rule of you're 9 meals away from a crisis, and why you come up with the 72-hour time frame. And that is that in resilience terms, and there is a resilience directorate within the Cabinet Office, that is a time that you think that the agencies will get their act together to repair this so that there is not widespread...
Yeah, we hope so. God, Heathrow couldn't get themselves back up and running within about 12 hours. So that was just an airport. And what I'm thinking I'd need more than 72 hours, but there we are. I'm going to have to leave it there. Chip Chapman, Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. I mean, look, he knows his stuff on this front. Would you have a preparation plan for this? Because I don't think we should have to. I think we should have a government that makes sure that we are safe.
Julia, I must be very stupid, because there seems to be something to me about on the one hand saying that everybody needs to prepare 72 hours of supplies because the Russians could attack us, and on the other hand saying let's buy Russian fighter jets for our Royal Air Force. There's something to me that doesn't quite make sense about that, but it must be that I'm just a little bit dim.
Yeah, but again, we have the same thing with the Chinese as well. Exactly. I mean, let them buy everything, let them supply everything, but like, oh, they're a hostile nation state. It is utterly bizarre. We need to be so much more self-sufficient in everything. So if only we had a supply of fossil fuels either under our feet or in the North Sea we could use to help make ourselves more energy self-sufficient. If only that were the case. Oh, we do. But anyway, deep sighs, everybody. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 if you want to have your say. Right now, let's take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking about just how many people are coming from abroad and using our NHS for free, and why is the NHS doing it, and why is the NHS not charging them? Because it's costing you and me a fortune. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
All of these sorts of things are part of a bigger picture. People are really struggling at the moment. We have a changing global economic situation. It is not sensible to continue to be committed to these entirely ideological net zero targets, particularly when other countries around the world are still producing so much coal and using gas and don't have these commitments. That what we're doing here is just an act of self-harm that really is a drop in the ocean, will make absolutely no difference to the global climate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. Let's talk right now about the NHS. It's the National Health Service, not the International Health Service. But whenever there are reports about foreign patients not only just coming over and using our NHS, basically, if you're getting an operation on the NHS and getting treatment on the NHS, you're putting someone who's here, British and entitled to the NHS, down the list. It's as simple as that. But when you don't even pay for it, when you're due to pay for it, then we start getting a bit angry. But we're looking at more than £250 million being owed by foreign patients because of failures to properly check they were actually entitled to free NHS treatment when they weren't. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Lawrence Gurlis. He's a GP at Same Day Doctor and a former NHS GP for over 30 years. Lawrence, thank you for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon.
I'm looking at this story, and again, this is sort of perennial that comes up about hospitals not asking, not checking. 256.4 million is what we believe is owed to the NHS, and basically it's just they just simply don't ask, they don't check, and then they don't ask for the money even when they do check. I think that is a fraction of what it really is, having spent enough time in London hospitals. Now, in no way am I suggesting anybody, because they've got a foreign accent, isn't entitled to be. People who are here for many, many years, pay taxes here, who are totally entitled to use the NHS, of course. But it seems to me that there is no one at any point when you go to hospital whoever asks for any ID, any checks on who you are, where you're from, why you're entitled to your care here. They have no way of knowing how many...
You just have to give an address in the UK. And you don't even have to do that. This is going back when Tony Blair brought in the identity card idea. I was all in favour of it. The civil liberties people were against. I was all in favour of it for this very reason, because if you have your UK identity card, you just show that, and that proves your entitlement to NHS healthcare. It would have been very straightforward, and I think we probably missed that boat. But maybe we could.
No, I don't think that everybody. I don't think that when I go to hospital, should be required to use an identity card to prove that I'm eligible. I think it's pretty obvious when someone you would question because they would say it was racist because you know that's what. There must be an easier way around this. Arguing I mean, it's so funny. I always think whenever I go to get a prescription at the quick one up at the chemist, and they say, do you pay for your prescriptions? And I say, yes, someone has to. And I always think, what would happen if I said no?
I can tell you the answer to that, Julia. 90% of prescriptions are dispensed free of charge. There's widespread fraud. It's a silly system. You're probably the only person. There are pharmacies in parts of England who never take money for a prescription because everyone just signs the back. So I mean,
see, I can't risk that. I would lose my job if I'd commit that. That's a criminal offence, isn't it? I would have thought.
It's fraud,
I could. I mean, again, my thing is I obey the law. I'm old-fashioned. I think you should obey the law. But this is the thing. I just think that. So even if they ask people, I mean, you get fake ID. Look, you can get fake driving licences. Frankly, I can't tell the difference between the two of them. I'm pretty sure that people could get around any of these things. There must be a simpler and easier way. And part of my issue is I don't think anyone should be in the country who hasn't got health insurance. I think if you come to this country, even as a tourist, you should be required to have health insurance. I don't think that's unreasonable.
There's another thing. Anyone is entitled to emergency care.
Absolutely.
Right? But what's an emergency? Does a woman who pitches up with a complicated twin pregnancy, this happens quite frequently, comes from abroad, early stage of labour, that's an emergency. It certainly is. That's going to be down. The cost is going to be down to you and me.
Yeah. And that happens on a grand scale in certain London hospitals as well. We know that. But this is the thing. No one really knows what the answer is to do that. There's a lot of admin. And we know admin in hospitals is pretty poor anyway. It's too much hassle, not worth it. No one cares. They're the person, the receptionist at the A&E, the doctor, the nurse. It's not their money they're spending. They're just doing their job. And I completely understand a doctor saying, well, I'm going to treat the person in front of me. But at the end of the day, this is not cost-free. Not only are we paying for it, even though it's a national health service, not an international health service, but it also puts people to the back of the queue. If there are people who aren't entitled to that healthcare who are getting treatment, they're pushing you back. I mean, so we end up paying for it. We can't afford as many nurses. We can't get as much treatment, and we wait longer for our own treatment. So we have every right to be angry about this.
Yeah, but we've got the admin. The administrators shouldn't be sitting in their offices drinking coffee. They should be down on the shop floor with credit card machines, like they are at the private hospital.
Oh, and they really are. The private hospitals, they won't even look at you unless you provided a credit card and they checked it works.
And they'll take £15,000 off your credit card as you walk through the door as a deposit. And that they've got an organisation to run, they've got salaries to pay, and they've got costs, and that's how the NHS should be thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why. But again, why do people think we've got duty of care? Tell you what, you go to any other country in the world and you expect the same treatment. Good luck with that, is all I can say. Just finally, I do want to ask you about a story today about how they're going to tackle Britain's sickness crisis, yet another plan that never seems to involve just telling people you're not really sick, who are we kidding? An army of health workers to be sent door to door, we're told, in a radical scheme to basically, they're going to roll it out across 25 parts of England, and basically they're going to just send people onto the streets, knocking on the door, saying, do you have any health problems? Aren't we just going to come up with more health problems rather than fewer?
Totally. There's a lot of hubris here. An army of health workers. Who are these health workers?
Where are they coming from?
Where's the money coming from? Where's the money going to be taken away from? You know what happens with these schemes? It's more cost, and it doesn't save. It's supposed to save money at A&E, at GPs. It won't. It's an additional cost. It won't work. Look, I'm a fan of West Streeting, but I think he's overreached this time. This A won't happen and B won't work if it does happen. It will just waste money.
Do you know what? That's literally a summary of most government policies. It won't happen, and if it did, it wouldn't work. Lawrence Gurley, it's always so good to talk to you. 12:57 is the time. Sam Armstrong, you and I are both chuckling at that, but it's true.
Yeah, it is true. What gets me is the doctors that think, and nurses that just want to treat everyone that comes through the door, and they think, oh, it's generous. You know, we've got a duty of care to hit Tom, Dick and Harry. Only they're never called Tom, Dick or Harry. But they're there on our salaries. They're not being generous, right?
The NHS isn't free.
No, like they're being generous with our cash. Stop it. Knock it off.
You don't have a right to.
If you were self-employed, like back in the old days with doctors, and the NHS funded you,
you weren't going to get
wouldn't
paid.
Be so generous if there wasn't going to be someone paying the tab at the end of it.
We pay taxes for a national health service, not for an international. I don't know why anyone thinks this is complicated. I really, really don't. Thank you very much, Sam. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Ian Collins, back from his holes.
Hello.
Did you have a good time? Yeah,
yes,
decent enough
good
weather?
time. Yeah. Well, it snowed.
Wait, were you snowing?
Yeah.
You were snowing, skiing.
I wasn't snowing. No.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, did a bit of that down the mountain. I went to the mountaintop.
Did you do a little bit of the old drinking in the evening?
A little bit of that, as you do.
That somehow happens.
Yeah, Bulgaria's an interesting place, isn't it?
There you are.
Yeah.
Well.
Do you remember 1978?
Oh, really?
But in a kind of nice way. It's like health and safety, not quite as.
Were there lots of trans pool players winning?
Almost, indeed, yeah, almost compulsory to smoke. That's just the kids. So much going on. Yeah.